All right. So, hey, Rick, how's it going?
Hi. Very good.
Awesome. For for the viewers that are new to this situation, so Rick Doblin is the founder and executive director of the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, MAPS. And he received his doctorate in public policy from Harvard's Kennedy School of Government and founded MAPS in 1986. He's worked tirelessly for several decades to bring MDMA-assisted psychotherapy to medical approval, which is expected to occur in 2022. And you can read more about his work and the organization at maps.org. So we're basically going to talk for the next 45 minutes about your vision, why psychedelic therapy is the new frontier in mental health. And this series of talks is the Solidarity series of Sound Mind Project. So we're also going to talk a bit about inclusion and diversity and what MAPS is doing to make sure everyone's included in this space. So I guess I would start by just saying, tell me a little bit about how you got involved with psychedelic research.
Well, I've just finished reading a really good article about, the title is called How Jewish History and the Holocaust Fueled Ruth Bader Ginsburg's Quest for Justice. And so I think we could write a similar article, How Jewish History and the Holocaust Fueled My Interest in Psychedelics. So, I was born in 1953, educated about the Holocaust from a Jewish family, and just, terrified by the way that the irrational takes over the rational and the way that people can dehumanize others and to otherize them, to otherize nature. And I just was terrified of that as I was growing up. And then early on got further traumatized still as a young boy by the Cuban Missile Crisis. And now it's not just the Germans after the Jews and the Germans trying to take over the world. Now it's the US and Russians kind of potentially blowing up the world. And then the worst part of it was, not the worst part, but the next final stage was my own country wanting to kill people in Vietnam and potentially sending me to be there. I was one of the last years of the lottery. So what really started me thinking is, how do we help people to feel connected to everything so that we don't do this dehumanizing others or people are less than? And I found the answer, one answer, many answers, but I found the answer in the mystical experience of unity, the ego dissolution experience that catalyzed by psychedelics. So at 18 in 1972, sort of in a very political time, not that different from the time that we have now, after the backlash had happened in 1970 and all psychedelic research was shut down and the counterculture was squashed and Nixon was elected and the war in Vietnam was going on. I just thought, psychedelics are an answer, the answer, but of course only one part of the answer. But so it's for political reasons. That was a decade before I learned about MDMA. And then I started realizing that psychedelics can also be really helpful for working people through trauma and how we filter the world through our past traumas. And we no longer see clearly, but we're influenced by our past negative experiences, also by our past positive experiences. So psychedelics felt to me like an area where nobody else was really trying to move them forward. It was squashed. I wasn't aware of the psychedelic underground movement. And so I was in Florida at the time or so. I just didn't really understand that there was this underground. And I was sort of reacquainted with it in 82 when I learned about MDMA. But when I learned about MDMA, it was as a codename Adam, which was the name for it as a therapy drug, which had been used from the middle 70s to the 80s. It was kept quiet, not because it was illegal, but because the fear of that it would be made illegal, the more people knew about it. But some people in the therapeutic circles experienced it, thought it was great, and thought maybe they could make a lot of money and more people should do it, and they turned it into ecstasy. So when I learned about Adam, it was also in the early stages of ecstasy, and that was taking place in public, and this was at the same time that Nancy Reagan and Ronald Reagan were president and first lady, and they were ramping up the drug war their number one thing. So it was doomed. So that's where I really got involved politically. So
how old were you then?
well, then I was 28 when I learned about MDMA, and then through the next bunch of years was in college, and so I actually got one college class credit for suing the DEA, trying to keep MDMA legal. And my goal, though, was to become a psychedelic therapist.
That's all of our goal.
Yeah.
We're all doing it.
And of course, the other side part of that goal is to go through psychedelic therapy ourselves as well.
Right.
So I was heading for a clinical psych PhD program. That was my plan.
Okay.
And so I graduated college in '87, and I went to a new college of Florida, which is an experimental college, and it didn't have any grades. So I knew I had to really study a lot for the GREs. So I did great on the GREs, and I had really good references and all. And I got to a couple of the final cutoffs at Duke and at George Washington, where they have clinical psych PhD programs where they have psychotherapy outcome research expertise. That's what I was looking for. But at the very end, so they'll have like 400 people apply for, 6 spots, but they'll bring 12 people in at the very end. And when I would tell the professors what I want to do is MDMA research, but I know it's not possible now, but I don't want to spend 5 years here and at the end you tell me no. I'll tell you no, if I can't get permission for that, I'll do something else. A lot of the faculty were excited about that, but there was always one or two that was like, no way. And I didn't quite understand that when you go into a PhD program, they want you to do their research. They don't want to tell you. They don't want you to tell them what you want to do. So in any case, I couldn't get in. So I felt like I didn't know what to do. My whole life from 1972 till 87 was in this one direction. So I went to the old reliable tool to help me, which was marijuana. So I got stoned and I thought, what am I going to do with my life? And while I was stoned, I had this idea. Now I might have gotten this idea some other ways, but the idea was that I have a pattern. The pattern is I want too much too soon. And this is another example of the pattern. And what I want is to do psychedelic research, but the politics is blocking the science. And I thought, okay, then I need to study the politics. And there was an article in Harper's Magazine by a couple of drug policy experts, and one of them was talking about the lawsuit that we had with the DEA starting in '84, where we actually won the case. The administrative law judge said MDMA should stay as a medicine, but the administrator of the DEA rejected the recommendation. And I realized the only way through was through the FDA. That's where I started MAPS. But one of the professors, the people there that mentioned our lawsuit was a professor at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard, which I'd never heard of before. And so I called him up, though, and I said, I need to study the politics of psychedelic research. Would you be my mentor if I can get in? His name was Mark Kleiman. And I managed to get in. I was sort of the token left-wing hippie of the year with all of these more mainstream people at the end. And lo and behold, that changed everything for me.
Yeah, that's really amazing. I think what strikes me is like becoming interested in psychedelics through trauma. And I think we have someone who's involved in our clinic, Sarah Cohen, is going to pop in, like a surprise pop in at 6:30 to talk about Rosh Hashanah and like making amends and like what it means to have collective trauma. But I think it's really important just that you mentioned the Holocaust and how that relates to intergenerational trauma and like how that is important for today, which is the second day of Rosh Hashanah, and sort of how that overlaps with interest in psychedelic therapy.
Yeah, I think that the history of the Jewish people is the history of trauma. So even if and I think that we are entering a era where more and more people are traumatized because looking at the news, what we're doing to the environment, icebergs melting, multiple species going extinct, the oceans being warming up and being more polluted, the wildfires. It's just climate refugees, political refugees, rise of authoritarianism here in the U.S. as well. That we're just going to have more and more people that are traumatized, and the challenges are getting greater and more consequential.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to come at them with more of a clearer mind and a clearer heart. So I think the need for therapy, for healing, is greater than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the reasons that psychedelics are coming to the fore now is that a lot of people recognize that. And the other part of it is just the failure of big pharma to really make a lot of progress with mental illness. That the last 30 years have been mostly bereft of new kind of breakthroughs in mental health. Ketamine for depression is the major breakthrough, which is a psychedelic-like substance that's been remarkably helpful for some people in suicidal refractory depression and other kinds of depression as well. And so I think what we see is a disillusionment with the SSRIs for depression, that they do a lot, but that they generally require you to take them for months, years, decades at a time. They have significant side effects, and they're more about masking symptoms than they are about getting to the root of the problem. And so our goal is to get to the root of the issues, help people do this deep processing that they would otherwise have a more difficult time to do without the psychedelics, and then make them help them learn about healing themselves on their own as they go forward, so they don't need drugs. So it's a completely different paradigm. You get the psychedelics a few times in the midst of therapy. It's not like a daily drug that you're supposed to take a long time. So
so can you walk me through what the process of psychedelic therapy looks like for people that don't know?
Yeah. So the first thing I'll say is about the method. So if you want to learn about our treatment method, we've standardized it, operationalized it in what's called the treatment manual. So if you go to maps.org, the website, on the top of the menu bar is research, then you go to MDMA. At the bottom of the MDMA page, it'll say treatment manual. So that's going to be something that's, I think, very helpful for people. But the basic idea of this is that there's going to, we call it inner-directed therapy. We don't say that we're the guide. The person is their own guide. So it's an 8-hour therapy session with MDMA with 2 therapists, usually male, female, but not always. So it's a 2-person team. One of the persons will be a licensed therapist, but we want the other person could be a peer with a lived experience without a degree. We're still negotiating with FDA about this, but the second person could potentially be someone who's a student trying to get a degree, or someone who has gone through some mental health training, like from us, the sponsor, but doesn't have to have a degree. We don't even want them to actually have or be required to have a college degree, but that's what the FDA currently requires. So anyway, we're negotiating about that. But the session is with music, with eye shades on, of the 8 hours, roughly half the time, people's eyes are closed, they're having an experience on their own. It's incredibly metaphorical and poetic. People think in imagery and tell stories. That's why I think some of the animations can be so effective, because people think in stories like that. And when you kind of do imagery and stories, but under the influence.
I'm going to show an animation at the end of this so that we can all talk about that too.
Yeah. So around the other half of the time, people are in dialogue with the therapists. That's fundamentally different than LSD or psilocybin, where there's probably 80 or 90% of the time people are quiet. A lot of times they're not even very verbal. Your ego is dissolved. It's hard for you even to speak. One of my favorite albums, by the way, from the 60s is by David Crosby, and it's a solo album, but he's got everybody from all the different groups in it. But the title of the album was "If I Could Only Remember My Name." And so that's a good description of parts of the classic psychedelic experience. So there's 3 of these MDMA experiences, 3 to 5 weeks apart, more or less 1 month apart, but it's embedded in a psychotherapeutic process. And so there are 12 90-minute non-drug psychotherapy sessions too. 3 before the first MDMA session for preparation, for building a therapeutic alliance, and then 3 of these 90-minute psychotherapy sessions after each MDMA session for integration. So it's better to really think about this as therapy enhanced by the psychedelic, rather than just here's the psychedelic and the therapy is incidental. It's really a therapeutic process. And in addition to this idea of these 8-hour sessions, the method is called inner-directed therapy. So it's not scripted like a lot of therapies, like cognitive behavioral therapy or cognitive processing therapy or prolonged exposure for PTSD. It's led by the person's unconscious. So once you have taken the MDMA, or this is very similar to LSD or psilocybin therapy too, there's a flow, there's an emergence into awareness of ideas and emotions, bodily sensations, and we follow them. And now there's different techniques that we can be using during the therapy that look like cognitive behavioral therapy or cognitive processing therapy or prolonged exposure, but we don't impose it on the situation, we support what's emerging. And the idea is that if there's symptoms, rather than trying to suppress them, the symptoms, we want to exaggerate them. We want to help people be taken over by them so that they can understand what's at the root of that. That's why a lot of times people are just shaking, people are crying, people are expressing. A bunch of our patients have said, I don't know why they call this ecstasy, which I think is really, really helpful to understand that.
Well, it's ecstasy if you're going dancing at a club, but maybe not ecstasy if you're lying on a bed with 2 therapists delving into your darkest unconscious memories, right?
Yes, yeah. And I think that's a really important point, Hannah, is that it's context driven.
Right.
Although we do see a lot of people that have had experiences at dancing or raves or something, and then difficult stuff comes up.
Right.
Because MDMA reduces activity in the amygdala. It makes fearful memories less fearful. And so what happens is that things may emerge. And if you're doing it in a sort of recreational celebratory context, and you only want to have good experiences, if you get something difficult and you try to stuff it back down, you could end up worse off for months,
right.
for a long time. So really
and I think it's important, I think, to note that that not only is this a very innovative therapy that in a lot of ways is getting at the root cause of the trauma, but the number of people that go through the phase 2 and so far the phase 3 trials that come in with PTSD and then they get treated for just 3 months, 2/3 of them walk away without PTSD. And these are people who have been treated with other modalities before. And that's a really big deal. And not only that, but they seem to keep getting better over time. And I'd like to hear your thoughts about why are people getting better over time? That we're talking years out.
Yeah. So let me just first do a little bit of the numbers. So at the 2-month follow-up after the last experimental session, chronic severe treatment-resistant PTSD, 23% no longer had PTSD. So that's therapy with either inactive placebo or low-dose MDMA that isn't therapeutic. And so that's actually really pretty good. This is a therapeutic intervention that's helping people that have previously not made much progress. When you add MDMA, it doubles to 56% at the 2-month follow-up. So that's more than doubles. And that just shows how effective the MDMA can be. But the 2/3 figure that you gave is from the 1-year follow-up. So people keep getting better. And I think what happens is that this strategy, when you're traumatized and these emotions are so fearful and powerful, and you don't know how to get through them, they take over your life. So you try to not think about them, you try to suppress them, and then they come in your dreams, and they come through triggers during the day. Something might remind you. So people are easily re-traumatized, and it's never really in the past. But in the therapy process, you learn that when things come up, you don't necessarily have to be overwhelmed. You can sort of experience them, and then you can kind of separate out, is it really happening now? and you can also, MDMA increases activity between the hippocampus and the amygdala, where we put memories into long-term storage. So people are better able to take these traumatic memories that when you have PTSD seem like they're always still happening and sort of store them in long-term memory. So once people learn that they can handle these emotions, it's painful, it's difficult, but you don't have to suppress them. You can process them. That's this sense of people learning how to heal themselves. And then you can keep doing that on your own more and more.
Mm-hmm.
The more strength you get, the more things you can experiment with your life, the more you can go out. And so there is this sort of self-healing process that has been catalyzed, and people are able to get better on their own. Because what we also talk about, the whole emphasis on integration, is that what happens during the psychedelic experience is very, very important. But what happens afterwards, as you think about it and integrate it and try to put things into practice, is even more important.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where people start learning these skills that they can do on their own. The other thing that we try to say to people is that anything that you can experience on a psychedelic, you can theoretically, and some people do, experience without the psychedelic. Mystical states. There's all sorts of people that have mystical states without taking the psychedelic. People have had all these loving states. I mean, one good way to think about MDMA is just like a deep breath.
Mm-hmm.
You just can think, things can sink deeper within a second or so, and you don't have to be a patterned reaction. So we're really trying to help people learn all these ways to do this on our own without the drug. It's not, I think this is one of the big differences from the 60s. The 60s was, it's more about the drug experience. We didn't really fully understand integration. And then there was this idea that, oh, if you've had psychedelics, you're smarter than everybody else who hasn't, and you have this unique knowledge. And I think that was a big mistake as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's really interesting. So as you know, I went through the MAPS training a year ago in Asheville, and with Michael and Annie Mithofer, and it was definitely changed my life. I'm totally sold, very excited to be in this world. But it's interesting to me that there's I think there were like 100 other therapists in the training, and I was the only person from the analytic tradition. It's sort of in a lot of ways been lost, just, in CBT world, and like PhD psychology programs don't teach it in the same way they used to. And I think to a lot of the people there, they were like, whoa, unstructured therapy. This is so innovative, and like, this is, actually what was the origin of what we're doing everywhere. But it's really interesting that the concept of the inner healer, and that if you essentially, the MDMA enhances the relationship between the patient and the therapist, and it allows for these things to come up in the way that they need to come up. So, Michael was explaining to me that, there's an agreement beforehand that you talk to a patient and you say, you're going to go through these sessions. And if you don't bring up your trauma, is it okay if we bring it up? But it's never had to happen before, because the mind has its own way of, like, if it knows you're trying to address the trauma and you're going into this therapy, it will find its way. But it might be indirect, and it might seem like totally tangential into the trauma, and that's the way that the mind can actually, the best way to go into it. It's almost like your own inner healer knows how to get there and how to heal yourself.
Yeah, and also, there's a book by Bessel van der Kolk, which is a psychiatrist expert in PTSD. The book is The Body Keeps the Score.
Mm-hmm.
He's the principal investigator here for our Boston site. But a lot of times, trauma that is so difficult to process doesn't even come up in an idea. It comes up in the body.
Right.
Certain kind of feelings, or stuck feelings, or painful feelings, or various kind of situations. And so we work with bodily sensations as well as sort of early signals of something deeper going on. So it's very much patient-focused, inner-directed by the patient, and it's a different approach, because therapists are used to being therapists and intervening and
giving homework. And
I think one of the things about the psychoanalysis was that it got, like a lot of religions, it gets too literal and too specific.
Mm-hmm.
What happened in this culture is, universally true, or
Yeah.
So a lot of Freud's theories, what I like to say, and I think it seems about right, is that Freud is like Columbus who discovers America, but he drew the map all wrong. You know, he sort of knew that there was some enormous unconscious continent that was influencing us way more than our rational mind, but some of the specifics that he.
Right. And I think what's really interesting, if you go back to his writing, a lot of his writing, he's like, I don't know, I'm just coming upon this right now, like go forth and learn, you know, I don't know all the answers, but I think the way it's been read over time is that he thought he knew all the answers, but in his actual writing, I think he knew he was just coming into something really new and important, but didn't necessarily know what to do with it. And I think in a lot of ways, it's like the people, especially in our current culture, so many people have trauma. There's like the, the index trauma of the DSM. That's like you can be diagnosed in a PTSD, with PTSD in like a psychiatric sense, but there's also all these other types of traumas we're all experiencing every day in this culture, and with the pandemic, and with the current political situation, especially marginalized populations. So I think in a lot of ways, this the concept of like bringing out the trauma into the present and really examining it is how we get healthy. And people that I talk to a lot of times are confused why you would bring it out. You know, like if you suppress it and forget it, like, isn't it gone? But the problem is it's not, right?
No, and not only is it not gone, but it's more powerful the more unconscious it is.
Right.
In terms of controlling your view of things, your behaviors, your attitudes. There's this reluctance to address things directly, and it's not a successful strategy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
we have just so many people that are suffering. And so I think that we're moving towards a new approach in psychiatry. Just to give you an example, I was invited to start a monthly lecture series by residents, psychiatric residents at UMass Worcester Medical School, which is an hour outside of Boston. And this was just a couple months ago. And I was super excited when they contacted me, because I knew that the president of the American Psychiatric Association was on the faculty of UMass Worcester, Jeffrey Geller.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, I would love to do this, but can you ask him to be a discussant after my talk? And he agreed to do that. And then I said, the head of psychiatry at Tufts, Paul Summergrad, also used to be the president of the American Psychiatric Association. He's taken an interest in this area. Would you ask him to be a discussant as well? And he agreed. So after my talk, there was me and the current and former president of the American Psychiatric Association all agreeing that the wave of the future in psychiatry is going to be with psychedelics.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's just such a mainstream kind of consensus. Amazing. But I have a question for you, which is about the VA.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you see the VA? And I guess to introduce it, I'll say that I had a talk with a couple of months ago with David Shulkin, who used to be the secretary of the VA.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking about how to bring MDMA into the VA, and that we're doing that at the Bronx VA. We're trying with Rachel Yehuda and the Loma Linda VA with Shannon Remnick and others there. And so David Shulkin was like, he was almost mad. He was like, "You are so naive. VA is designed to squash innovation. That there is no way you're ever going to get permission." And I was like, well, I just can't wait to tell you when we did, to show that you were wrong. So I'm just curious, Anna, what you feel is the opportunity or the resistance inside the VA that you work at.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's that's a great question. I think it's really interesting, Rick, just the different levels of interest. So as you know, I'm starting a psychedelic clinic in Philadelphia, right? And essentially it's part of our nonprofit Sound Mind. And almost daily I get emails from therapists in the region saying like, this is what I want to do with my life, from patients saying like, this is the therapy I need. How do I get it? And so it feels like in a lot of ways, everyone knows in my Facebook feed, you know, it's like everyone I know knows that this is the future. So I'm like walking around thinking, you know, everyone knows this is the future of mental health. Like, obviously you look at the numbers, you look at the interest of therapists that know that they don't have the tools they want to have, and they're like dying to have these tools, you know. And then you go into universities or the VA, and somehow it's like people haven't heard of it. You know, like I find myself, I actually, when I give people the research that MAPS has done, they're often very surprised and excited. Like the psychiatry department at the VA or at UPenn, people are very interested, but it's not like, it feels like, oh, how did I miss this article? I didn't know this article. How did, like, what's happening out there? You know, so it feels very strange to be part of like two situations and scenes that are have such different understanding or level of knowledge about what's happening in the psychedelic therapy situation and approval process. So I think, in terms of the VA, I've actually found people at the Philadelphia VA very interested. I think in a lot of ways, it may have to, as you said, start as ketamine-assisted therapy and sort of bridge into MDMA. It's almost like you have to start with what people already know and seems like less threatening or weird. But at the same time, at the Philadelphia VA, when I went in and said, I want to do a research project about MDMA assisted psychotherapy, and they said, well, where were you 2 years ago when like the psilocybin people were coming in saying we could be part of the psilocybin trials? Like, we didn't have anyone interested. And now we like, here you are, and is it too late? You know, I said, no, it's not. So people are interested. I think especially if you provide the data and the research, you know, it's not, I think in a lot of ways, just even just the psychedelic movement, using the terms, you have to sort of change the terms, you know, like they're still using the word hallucinogen. You know.
Right. Well, we're not going to go back to that. I mean, that is the, that's the government for you.
Yeah.
That's the National Institute on Drug Abuse. If you want to get a grant in these areas, you have to use the word hallucinogen, which is a negative, pejorative word. It's a delusion. It's not real. It's, you know, psychedelic is more neutral, meaning mind manifesting, but of course it's connected with the counterculture in a lot of people's minds, but that's fading, I think. But yeah, no, hallucinogen is an old, pathetic, tired out word that, by the wayside. But it's better than psychotomimetic, which was the word before, which meant that it mimics psychosis. You know, so I guess hallucination is one step up from psychotomimetic.
Right. I also, it's interesting because even like on Facebook, when I'll post things about like psychedelic therapy, I've gotten like flagged that they're saying like, we're not going to let you promote your material anymore. And I've like, just last night at like midnight, I was writing to like the Facebook ads people and saying like, no, I'm a doctor, you know, like this is real. Like, and I was putting in the research that you guys have done, you know, saying like, I'm not doing anything illegal.
Oh, well, let us help you with this. If they try to block you, we will bring the full research. You know, we have some donations from early Facebook people. One of our main fundraisers who's helping us, who may join the MAPS board, Joe Green, was Mark Zuckerberg's roommate at college at Harvard.
Yeah.
So if they give you a hard time and continue,
we'll take Facebook down, Rick.
Yes, well, this is not part of it. We will.
This is on Facebook Live, but you know.
Well, there is absolutely no reason for them to go after you.
I think it was a robot. You know, it was AI, and I wrote this down, and they said, "Oh, sorry." So, but it's interesting. So they lifted I'm not banned anymore as of this morning.
Oh, good. Hannah, that was okay. Well, okay, well, you know, we've got our own fights. We'll go after the Attorney General.
Right. Awesome.
For not licensing us to grow marijuana for our research with vets. You know, so we just did the first research with vets with PTSD with marijuana.
Nice.
And we're now going to try to get $10 million from the state of Michigan from their marijuana taxes that they have to put out $20 million a year for 2 years for studies with veterans, mental health, and reducing veteran suicides. So.
Awesome. So I have a few questions that everyone's interested in, and then I want to show you the animation. But so for all these therapists that are extremely pumped about psychedelic therapy and may or may not have a site or may not have the means, or there might not be spots for MAPS training, what does the next 5 or 10 years look like for them? Should they, I think in a lot of ways I'm helping people understand that there will be room for everyone, and like MAPS will keep doing trainings and there's a lot of opportunities, but I think people are really hungry for this therapy now, especially therapists. So what should they do in the meantime?
Well, the first thing is read the treatment manual on our website, because that describes our therapeutic approach. Then if you go to the website also, there's an area for therapists who want to learn about our training program. So it's, you go to the MAPS website, and then one of the menu bars says participate, and then underneath there it's MDMA therapy training program. So you gave like a 5-year time frame. So what we're hoping for is the end of 2022, early 2023, we'll have FDA approval. And so we are going to be ramping up our therapy training program. And so because it's therapy assisted by the MDMA, that the FDA has policies that are called REMS, risk evaluation and mitigation strategies. It's a way for them to sort of tailor policies to the particular risks that need to be mitigated for each drug. And for us, because it's therapy, as I said, the prescribers and the people that treat patients are all going to have special education from us in the therapeutic portion of what we're doing. Once you're certified by us, you've done it, you can still innovate. You don't have to use our method, but at least you have to know it. So we are trying to set up collaborative relationships with a variety of different Naropa University in Boulder. Marcela Ot'alora is.
Marcela is next on this.
Yeah. So she's going to be doing a training right now for Naropa. So I think for people who want training, I think read the treatment manual. There's Stan Groff, who's really the mentor for many of us, who pioneer of LSD research. He wrote a book called The Way of the Psychonaut and Cycling for Inner Journeys. I would suggest reading that book. We have a lot of interesting books. I think the other part is our Zendo program, where we do psychedelic harm reduction at Burning Man and other events. This was now Burning Man went virtual, but you can learn about Zendo training and go to that portion of the website, and it's similar principles as how to work with people in a therapeutic setting. I would also say, well, it's good that we started out by talking about the Holocaust. That a lot of what happened there was according to German law. So what's legal and what's moral are two different things. So, I mean, that's an obvious statement. So what I think is that,
I mean, it's not obvious for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's not. But I would say for those who believe that, have your own experiences, sit with your friends, get practice, learn about it, and then we do want to increase the number of people in our therapy training program. The other, like you're talking about a ketamine clinic, that ketamine is, we believe, more effective when it's given with therapy than just like, here's a pharmacological tool and don't talk to us about what goes on. Those people that are psychiatrists or maybe therapists can get involved with ketamine clinics and really work psychotherapeutically. You can study holotropic breathwork that Stan Groff developed. I think there's a lot of things you can do to prepare for this field to emerge. Friday, Compass Pathways, which is a for-profit company working on psilocybin, they went public. And shockingly, their company's supposedly, according to the stock market, worth $1 billion. They're just in phase 2. They're in phase 3, but they have their own training programs. USONA Institute is another nonprofit working on psilocybin.
And so MAPS is nonprofit, and MAPS is a PBC, which is also doesn't return, that doesn't take investors, like doesn't give money back to investment. So I think that's really interesting, and it's like the first time this has ever happened, as far as I understand. And also, this will be the first time of a rescheduling of a drug, right?
Well, not exactly. I mean, so there have been nonprofit pharma before. when I started MAPS in '86, that was, I didn't know, but no drug had ever been made into a medicine by a nonprofit. And that didn't happen for 13 years later till 1999, and that was the abortion pill, or RU46.
Okay.
That was by John D. Rockefeller III, had the Population Council, and Warren Buffett was the main funder, along with the Pritzker family. But it was mainly Warren Buffett and the Rockefellers made RU46 into a medicine. There has since been some other nonprofit pharmas that have, Victoria Hale, who's joined our board of directors, started One World Institute, and they got $160+ million from the Gates Foundation to develop drugs for parasites in India and other countries that big pharma was ignoring. She also got $62+ million from Susan Buffett, Warren Buffett's first wife, to do a nonprofit development of a low-cost contraceptive, a hormonal IUD. But it's rare.
It's rare and it's expensive. You spent a lot of your time getting the funding that's needed to get this through. And also you have an anti-patent. Can you talk about that for a minute?
So in 1986, when I started MAPS, another group started a company called NDA, New Drug Application, NDA International, for Ibogaine, for opiate addiction. And they decided that forget this nonprofit model, they would do it in a for-profit way. Howard Lotsoff and Norma Lotsoff were the main ones that started it. They've got use patents, so that Ibogaine is in the public domain, MDMA, LSD, psilocybin, all these drugs are in the public domain. But then you could have use patents if you're the first one to think of a use. So what I saw going on with the Ibogaine is that Howard contracted with Deborah Mash at the University of Miami to do an Ibogaine study. He ran out of money. She continued the study. She discovered noribogaine, which is a long-lasting metabolite. She then patented it. Howard said, hey, you can't patent it. I started you in this, and everything you developed, I own. And then they all sued each other. And then other people sued each other, and the whole thing. So it delayed the development of Ibogaine for decades until the patents ran out. But when I saw that happen, I contacted their patent attorney that got the use patent of Ibogaine for opiate addiction, which Howard really was the first one to think about. And I said, I want an anti-patent strategy so nobody can patent any of the uses of MDMA. And so the idea is that to be a patent holder, you have to invent the idea of something. So I just did a podcast with Andy Weil from Integrative Medicine the other day. And so we shared the story. He sent me a story of someone who had MDMA experience and it cleared up their rheumatoid arthritis. And he was like, oh, MDMA cures rheumatoid arthritis. I said, I need this woman to write this up. So she wrote it up. We put it up on our website. And now nobody can patent MDMA for rheumatoid arthritis. Think about it. So the idea is to tell the stories of all these unusual different things that MDMA can do. Recently, we've tried to make a case for the idea of MDMA for postpartum depression, so that nobody can patent that.
Right. So you're essentially putting it in the public domain. You're putting the stories so no one else can say, like, we thought of this. You're like, no, it's already obvious.
Yeah. Maybe they'll think of some other thing that we haven't thought of. In which case, I'm not opposed to people patenting it, but we wanted to make it so people could not patent MDMA for PTSD or MDMA for psychotherapy or MDMA for couples therapy or all this kind of stuff. And
then once it gets approved for PTSD, people can use it off label or get it approved for other indications.
You can prescribe things for off label. The sponsor is not supposed to encourage off label prescription. But you can prescribe it off label, but you're not going to have.
You can't tell me to prescribe it off label, but I can prescribe it off label, Rick.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Have it, let's see, how should I say it? You're not going to have it covered by insurance.
Right.
So we're going to want to try to get insurance coverage. And once we get it approved for PTSD, then we'll start, as you said, through the benefit corporation, which maximizes public benefit, not profit. We'll be selling MDMA. We'll be selling it for a reasonable profit. We'll be making money, paying taxes. And whatever money is made is going to go to the mission of MAPS, because MAPS is the 100% owner of the MAPS Public Benefit Corporation. I could put in the chat the link to the section on the website, which we call Accounts of MDMA's Healing Effects. So that's where some of these stories are there.
Awesome. Yeah, that's helpful. We can put that onto the Facebook feed too, because there's some viewers there. Question about psychedelic preparation. Do you have any thoughts about what's important for preparing someone for therapy?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the most important thing, and I'd say this is also true for recreational users, is that you need to be prepared for the full range of emotions. That it's not like you take MDMA, your fear is gone, you feel fine, and your problems have just dissolved.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people go through very painful experiences. This is where we said that they say they don't know why they call it ecstasy. So I think the first part of the preparation is to make a decision. Are you willing to try to experience whatever is coming up? Another key part of the preparation, we talk about it as the therapeutic alliance, which is trusting the therapist, developing a trusting relationship. If you don't trust them, find other therapists. You need to feel safe and supported in what's happening. We actually ask people to withdraw from all of their psychiatric medications, and that can take a month or more sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So for some people to get rid of the SSRIs, to get rid of their anti-anxiety, depression medicines, it's challenging. So we try to work with people very closely, monitoring them during that time that they're tapering off their medications. And we do that in conjunction with their prescribing physician or a psychiatrist.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot to be said for understanding what you're getting into. So we have a very complicated but lengthy informed consent form. That's really good. There's a movie that I would recommend, a documentary called Trip of Compassion, which is on Vimeo. It's the best movie ever made, a documentary about real patients going through MDMA therapy, and it's about what the process is like. So that would give you a good insights into what it would be like. The other part of it, I think, is to start paying attention to your dreams. Because what we're
Such an
talking
analyst.
yeah, well, like it comes,
Yeah.
this membrane, we talk about psychedelics as bringing things up for the unconscious, but we all do that every night when we dream. And a lot of people
Right.
don't remember their dreams, but it doesn't mean you don't have them. And if you wanted to remember them, you could focus your time on them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So this process of integrating is very greatly facilitated if you pay attention to your dreams.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the themes of the MDMA experience will come to you in your dreams, or the themes of your therapy in general. So I think a practice of dream recall and thinking about it, and even in the morning, if you can just wake up more slowly, not wake up with an alarm clock and rush off to bed, but or to the day or to the shower or whatever, but take 5 minutes or 3 minutes just to try to pull those dreams there. Tools for relaxation, for mindfulness, those are good to learn as preparation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Holotropic breathwork, hyperventilation is good preparation for psychedelics.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or for an MDMA therapy. I think there's, some people talk about meditation as being helpful. Personally, I am not called to meditate. I would much rather, when I get an idea, letting your mind go and you get this idea and, oh, I should do that. And then you want to be non-attached. I'd rather be attached and, get it done. I'm more of an activist in that way, but I think that, learning meditation is good preparation. Reading from the psychedelic literature is really good.
Yeah, I think my mom is actually on the Zoom right now, and I'm just remembering when I used to do a lot of these extended Buddhist retreats, and I would talk about non-attachment, and she'd be like, yeah, the thing you're doing, the detachment stuff, and I'm like, no, not detached. I'm not attached,
I can understand your mom's confusion.
Yeah.
Now, if it's appropriate, I just see Sam Sugarman has put a question in the chat.
Yeah.
What are your greatest fears around the legalization of these psychedelic compounds for medical use, pharmaceutical corporation gains? Well, I would say that what I'm worried about is that as you take something controversial, like psychedelics, and you introduce it into society, it's very important the initial impression that society gets. And so the worry that I would have is that for-profit companies would come in and think short term and cut down on the therapy to cut down on the costs and charge high prices and sort of leave people not always having good experiences. I actually feel good about Compass Pathways. One of the things that they did, the only thing I would say that they did that I think is wrong, is that they did overbroad patent claims on their process patent for psilocybin, but they were challenged and they had to withdraw those claims. So that's one concern, is you get these for-profit companies, and instead of focusing on what they can create, they focus on blocking other people from doing stuff, which we see a lot of times in pharma. So that's a worry, that they try to scale too quickly, that they're out for making money on the stock but not on the real substance. Again, I don't see that with Compass, but I see that with some other companies. You know, I worry that, well, a good example is to talk about ketamine. You know, Spravato and ketamine for depression has been approved as a pharmacological treatment without any psychotherapy. And it does work that way for a lot of people, but I think people would get better outcomes if they had therapy. And now there's starting to be some studies, you know, to confirm that, but a lot of ketamine therapists believe that already. So I think we get suboptimal outcomes, and then that can compromise the ability to really roll it out in society when you have some suboptimal outcomes. But what they do is it's like maximization of profit for the pharmaceutical company rather than maximization of outcomes for the patient. So when you provide ketamine without therapy, the results fade, you don't do the integration, they just keep coming back for more and more ketamine. So that's good for the pharma company, but it's not the best for the patients.
It can also lead to like dark experiences that make trauma worse, you know, if you don't have someone safe with you.
Yeah. You know, then I don't know how much I'm worried about it, but I am thinking about all the direct-to-consumer ads, you know, ask the doctor if MDMA is right for you. You know,
Terrible. I hate that.
With all these, like, you know, psychedelic company ads on TV.
Yeah.
We've made some for fun. I mean, or some slides of some of these ads. So I think it's humorous. Maybe it could be an animation. Maybe you could make the ad for, you know, ask your doctor, you know, maybe your PTSD has a cure, you know.
I hate that as my future life.
Okay, well,
no, but related to this, as we have talked about over the phone several times, I'm working on a product to prepare people for psychedelic experiences, potentially co-founding it with Marcela, who's coming on next. And it's a really big debate, like with others involved, as to whether you take investors, or you know, will that give you the means to actually develop a really good product, or are you then going to be beholden to people that aren't going to prioritize the needs of the patients and are going to prioritize profit over everything else? And I think it's really hard. You know, you can have a PBC, but also there's things that change if you take investors that want a return on investment, you know?
Yeah. Well, what mostly changes is the price. They start, and then they try to cut down the expenses as well, make more profit. So then they're going to try to find this spot where it's the minimum cost and the maximum profit. On the other hand, the good part of that, in a sense, is that, you know, there are hundreds and hundreds of millions of people with depression. There are, you know, probably hundreds of millions of people with trauma when you start looking around the world as well,
or everyone.
So we really do need to figure out, how do we do this economically?
Right. And how do we roll it out to the world? And a lot of countries in the world don't even have, you know, therapists that we can train. You know, there's just a lot of places that don't have the person power to have people sitting 8 hours that don't necessarily have any background in psychedelics. So I think it really is about how do you make it, how do you create products and programs that make therapists feel comfortable leading someone into something that could be like really heavy and difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I do think we need the for-profits. I don't think they're inherently evil, but the tendency to maximize profit over anything else, you know. So capitalism itself is helping to create innovation, but it's also helping to destroy the world with this idea that externalities doesn't count in your profits, and you lose.
Right. Which, like, for people that don't know what an externality is, it's like a company that would like throw trash in the ocean and they don't have to pay for that and it just disappears. And for them, it leads to more profit that they don't have to like recycle it. They just like toss it somewhere, but it costs the society something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me show you this animation. I would love to, like, because we started a little bit late, I think it's fine to go a few minutes over, but I think I just wanted to preface this animation, if I can figure out how to screen share it. It's the first half of an animation of you narrating what is MDMA for PTSD. And we recorded this about a year ago. And part of it is just like, how do you create different types of resources that allow for inclusion of people that might not have the background in even knowing that they have PTSD, knowing that they like having the wherewithal to like go and Google, like, these are my symptoms and what are the options and what's coming up in the future, like really starting from the beginning and saying like, this is what PTSD looks like, this is what MDMA is, and potentially reaching marginalized people through that. And I think I think there's a lot of ethical considerations when you talk about enrolling marginalized populations in trials, because there's been a lot of ethical violations in the past in trials. But at the same time, if you don't include people, then you don't have those people to include in the data that then tells us like, does this work for everyone or not? And that sort of has a ripple effect if you exclude certain people from trials. So I know that MAPS has worked really hard to create more inclusive events and education and trainings, especially this last year you had this therapy training for people of color in Kentucky, which our whole team attended. And it was amazing. And also, like, there's just a lot of barriers, with the war on drugs, and like who really will serve to lose if they get, if they're using psychedelics and some cop comes along, like, who's going to be arrested. It's like, it really is a privilege to be able to safely feel safe about trying psychedelics. And so part of this is we have this whole animation project about explaining, some of these concepts.
Yeah. I can just say one thing before you start it, which is that, you talked about some countries that don't even have therapists or psychiatrists. Rwanda, a lot of the therapists, psychiatrists were killed. So in the training that Marcela is going to start with Bruce, her husband, starting with in association with Naropa, there's 2 people from Somaliland, one from Kenya. We have interest in people in South Africa. So we are trying to train people, but we will need to develop different models. The therapy model might work well there, that there's sort of local healers that aren't formally called psychiatrists or psychotherapists that we have to learn how to train. So
like community health workers, I think is what people, what has been rolling out in many African countries. And I think there can be a model around that for sure. I've done some work in Bhutan, and there's one psychiatrist there, and I think he just moved to Australia. So, it's like, so what do you do when it's like a rural population that people may not feel comfortable engaging in this? How do you create these tools for them? Anything else that we should talk about before?
The one big thing to say is that we will know in a month from now if our first of 2 phase 3 studies was statistically significant. So we're thinking we'll know on October 20th or so.
I remember I asked you, you said, there was some data coming out at a certain point in January, and I asked you a year ago, like, how will we know? Are you going to announce it? And you said, you'll know by the look on my face if you see me. Because I'll look like not okay if it doesn't say,
Yeah, no, we're working to try to give an exclusive to a major media. So we're still working on that. But yeah, we want the world to know. And we're hopeful. I mean, we could be wrong, and maybe it won't be significant, but we think it's likely to be based on the interim analysis results. And so that's the next big thing. And then this idea of moving to Europe.
Big
picture that we need to globalize this. And we need to actually raise another $30 million to do that. And that's the big test, is does the philanthropic model work compared to all these investors? The advantage of for-profit is that you've got easier access to capital. You know, Compass has just raised over $200 million. I mean, in the history of MAPS, we've raised over $100 million, but that's over 34 years. They've raised $200 million over the course of the last year and a half or something like that.
Right.
So there's investors willing to throw their money at them.
Right. Well, because you have to convince people you're going to invest, you're going to put your money in this organization, and then what you get out of it is like a better humanity, you know, and they can say like you get dollars back. Like, yeah. I think, you know.
And we're also wanting to say too that in a sense we're going to be a check on the for-profits. You know, to the extent that there's a nonprofit, we're going to try to do best practices, and that'll maybe the USONA Institute as the nonprofit psilocybin will be a check to some extent on the for-profit psilocybin. So yeah, we have a harder, and our best challenge now is this 30 million we need to go to Europe and globalize. You know, if we can't do it, that means we're not really serving the patients well, because they're in need and they don't care for-profit, nonprofit, but they would care depending on the price, depending on the quality of the services, things like that. So I think, yeah, it's our challenge to really demonstrate that nonprofit can scale. And that will be our big challenge. So we're going to wait to get the results. And if this study was statistically significant, then that'll really increase our ability to persuade people to help us globalize.
Yeah, totally. And you've always succeeded at raising the money you need, so I'm not worried.
It's enormous amounts of money. I've always been worried, but we've always succeeded. So that's maybe the difference. We've succeeded because I'm worried. Yeah,
it's true. You don't stop.
Right.
Well, Rick, thank you for coming on. Shana Tova.
Yeah, yes, my pleasure.
Yeah.
And I think if I can stay, I'll watch you and Marcela for a bit.
Okay, cool.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, Hannah.
Bye. Everyone, we're back. I'm going to read off Marcela's bio and then pull her on so you can know who she is. So Marcela is dedicated to the treatment and research of trauma through art and through the use of MDMA-assisted psychotherapy. She's the principal investigator of the phase 2 and 3 MDMA-assisted psychotherapy trials in Boulder, Colorado. She's also one of the lead trainers for MDMA therapy for MAPS. She received her MA in transpersonal psychology from Naropa University and MFA from University of Greensboro in North Carolina. She was born and raised in Colombia, South America, and now lives in Boulder, Colorado. And I'm really excited to have her on. She's one of my favorite people in the whole world. So let me grab her here. Technology, I don't know.
I'm here in front of our future clinic together.
Oh my gosh.
This is out the window.
Yes. Oh my goodness. I love it. Sign me up like 10 times. I love it. So you saw the picture of you and Ezra?
I did. It just warms my heart. He's a cutie.
He's like, grandma.
That was the sweetest thing ever.
Yeah. I'm so excited to have you. I feel like I sent you like the 1,000 questions I want to ask you last night at like 2 a.m. and there's no way we can get through all of them, but I feel like we could talk for hours and hours. So I feel like the most important thing is for me to tell you that I'm very grateful that you're like in the world and you're doing the work you're doing, and it's incredible, like the story of you know, coming through your own trauma and then coming into psychedelic medicine and then training other people. And it's so inspiring. I think you inspire so many people.
Thank you.
And yeah, I feel like there's just a lot we could talk about. But mostly it's gratitude right now for me. So I guess I'd love to talk to you about maybe just starting out with how you got involved in psychedelic therapy. And I'm really interested in just being, you're from Colombia, and just the story of like how you ended up here and how maybe that background may have influenced or informed the way you go about your current work.
Mm. Yeah. Well, I came to psychedelic therapy sort of by accident. I had tried lots of different things before, had been hospitalized a few times because of PTSD, because of trauma, and nothing had really worked. Up to that point, it was always medications that were not working or diagnoses that were misdiagnoses. And so when I was able to do MDMA assisted psychotherapy, it was like, I think it was sort of like the beginning of being able to say, I've looked at this the wrong way. I've approached this whole thing the wrong way. Kind of like, I kept looking for, is there an answer to think better about what happened to me? Like, can I think about it in a different way that would then change everything? And it was like, there's not an answer. Nothing is going to make that feel better.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that just really opened the space for being able to explore other things, because of course I knew that. And so, but I kept searching for that. Like, if I look at it from a different angle, will it look different? So it was really the beginning of me being able to see some potential that I had never seen before. And it was so, and it took a long time after that. It wasn't like, oh, that was it, and I was healed, and and let's move forward. And so for me, it was, no, there's a lot of work that I need to do, and there's a way for me to do it. Like, there's an opportunity for me to actually get there, to go on that path. And I wanted to be able to offer that to other people as well. So it was really the beginning of me being able to say, this needs to be an important piece, an important option for other people as well, who are also.
What do you mean by you wanted it to look different? Like, if there's an answer somewhere, what does that mean?
Like, it's sort of like saying, if I look at the trauma differently, from a different perspective, can I then be like, oh, I get it. I get it now. I understand. I can leave it behind and move forward. And I think a lot of people with PTSD do that. If I find out this one little piece, if I do this one little thing, will it look differently? And can I then I can heal, right?
Is that like a way of blaming yourself for the not looking at it in the correct way, or like being too burdened by something? Is it like self-blame?
Definitely. It's part of self-blame. It's part of like, why is it that I'm still feeling this way? Why is it, like, and I hear that from so many other people too, like, this happened 20 years ago. Like, what am I doing? Like, what is wrong with me? Right. And so then it's that thought that there is this sort of magic thing that can happen, that maybe happens for other people. And that's why they can go on. And that's why they don't have PTSD, because everybody has trauma. And so there's something wrong with me if I can't let that happen, right? If I can't just let it go without and move forward. So I think that there's also this place of, I can let it go, but I can't move forward. So there's really not, letting go doesn't mean you're over it, right?
Right.
So I think it's part of that. It's part of what happens with having PTSD is that it's pretty isolating, right? And you hear all these descriptions, like, what is it that causes PTSD? What are the symptoms of PTSD? And they say hyperarousal, like, but people don't go into like what exactly that means. Like what exactly is hyperarousal? How does that affect somebody's life if they have hypervigilance, right? Like we say, oh, hypervigilance, checked hypervigilance. And what is it? Right. What is hypervigilance that how does hypervigilance affect somebody's life? We don't talk about those parts, I don't think.
How did it affect your life?
It affected my life. Well, the first thing I want to say is that I don't think it's a cure. I don't think you can get cured from PTSD because you don't get cured from trauma, right? It's more that it doesn't control your life and that you are able to have other things in your life. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. But for me, it was hypervigilance meant, if I can give you an example, if I would go to a gathering with people, I could be there. And then if somebody was talking to me and then all of a sudden got distracted and they looked at somebody else, then it's like, it's something I said. They moved away, they turned away, they hate me, I said the wrong thing, I talked too much, I didn't talk enough. This other person moved a certain way. Is that dangerous? Is somebody gonna hurt me there? Or over here, like somebody's really being really nice to me. What is it that they want? They're gonna want something. And that happens with everyone and everything in the room. And it is a constant. And so then it was like, being alone is better. Not having to be around that is better. But then it's also then creates a whole set of other things, which is the isolation and the aloneness and the lack of connection and the sadness that comes, the incredible pain that comes from that as well.
Right. There's a researcher at the VA in Philadelphia, Jason Goodson, and he's made a safety behavior scale and has like 60 different aspects of like safety behavior from trauma. And a lot of times people have to hear those specifics to know like, oh, I'm doing that. Like choosing the seat in the restaurant that can that faces towards the exit. So you could like know how to get there, or like it's like your back's towards the wall. So no one's going to like come up behind you. You know, there's like these subtle things that people might be making these decisions and not even realize they're choosing their seat in a restaurant based on trauma. Right. But it really has to be, because it's like an unconscious decision in a lot of ways, it has to be really spelled out for people that they're like, whoa, my life is being controlled, in a certain way, and I'm like always on edge, and like they don't realize other people aren't doing that. Like other people at the party aren't like looking around and just like monitoring everything that's going on for like safety,
Right. And it is exhausting. It is absolutely exhausting. And because some of it you don't know and you don't realize and you're not conscious of, you just think there's something wrong with you. Like, now I'm exhausted because I went to a party, or I'm exhausted because I was with a group of people, and then being up all night because you're just thinking over and over and over, what happened there? What did I say? What did I not say? What was happening, any little thing, even somebody in the street. Oh, I didn't, that person said hello and I was distracted and I didn't say hello. I'm this terrible person because I didn't respond and I didn't say hello. Right. So it's just everything in the environment with people that you know and people you don't know.
And I think that it's really important, I guess, like some of the questions I wanted to ask you are about the concept of shame and shame, like for people that don't know the concept of shame and guilt, like guilt is something that you're feel bad that you did, and shame is something that you feel bad that you are, like it's something you feel like is wrong with you. It's like the feeling that you want to disappear.
Right.
And there's a lot of I guess for me it's like people that haven't seen PTSD therapy or psychedelic therapy or just like trauma therapy in general, they think that when you go through therapy for trauma, you're like dealing with the external, right? You're like, oh, I was in the military and my friend got shot next to me and like I have to deal with that image. But a lot of the therapy has to do with like how much someone blames themselves for the trauma, and the like it seems to always have to do with like, first it's the external trauma, and then it's like the internal self-blame and shame that goes along with it, and like how to forgive yourself for the aspects of like, did I choose to be with this person? Did I go on this date because I like them and then it's my fault that a rape happened? Or is it, did I not protect my friend in the military and that's why he died? Like, I could have intervened. And a lot of the like perseveration, like the cycling thoughts have to do with what you could have done that you didn't do.
And it's basically not, it's not like the event that happened is your response to it. Right? And your response to it, there's so many theories about why some people get PTSD and why they don't, and so why other people don't. But I do think that if you have a solid sense of self, and you feel like you belong and you feel like you have a place in the world, then a trauma can happen and your response to it can be to really get help and to really move through it and find the resources and the support and then get through it. And if you don't have that to begin with, then it's much harder, right? And then is that the difference? It could be, I think it's part of it. I don't think it's one thing, but it is, but I do think that shame is a huge piece. And, the whole
and those are the people that aren't going to go looking for the help, right? They're going to say like, I did it wrong. Like, I shouldn't have done that. Like, I'm not going to go looking for help because it's my fault. Right. And then it becomes like internalized and And, the shame is going to be there. And so it's more, can I not collapse under its weight? And what can begin to happen with that? And the shame is about being silenced, right? Like, shame means I can't talk about it because it's shameful. So I can't talk about certain things, and I can't talk about ways that I feel about it and ways and things that happened. And so it creates, it's very pervasive. And when I work with clients and we talk about shame and shame comes up, and it's this, there's no reaction to shame. Like if you're sad, you can cry and you can cry and you can cry. And then afterwards you feel better, you feel a little better. If you're really angry, you can scream, you can break things, you can, there's all these things that you can do, and in a healthy way, right? Like you can actually just like, I'm not going to hurt anybody or anything, but here it is. I call it like go buy a set of plates. I tell my clients, go buy a set of plates that are like 10 cents each, and you have them in the cupboard, and then you go, okay, where is my place where I can just break these plates? And then you're not breaking your really good dishes and then feeling bad about it. You're just breaking the 10-cent plate or 50-cent plate. You can do that. Right. With shame, all you can do is try to disappear. How do you disappear?
Right. It's only inward. It's only internal. It's only a collapsing, right? And then when you think about this collapsing into oneself and trying to make contraction, you contract, right? You contract. And the whole existence, or I can talk about personally, my whole existence was, what are the things that I can bring up to keep that contraction going? Because that's the only safety thing. That's the only thing that I can control, right? And so it's those defenses are the ones that then keep you going, because all the defenses are there so that I can contract. So if I'm not going to be in a group of people, then I can be alone. It's a contraction. Okay, I have the coping strategies to do that, and I have the coping strategies to do something else, and it's a contraction. And I think MDMA actually allows you to loosen the grip on those contractions, on those defenses that contract, so that you can actually then look at the contracted self and be able to really see that contracted self and who's hiding. What other parts of you are hiding under that contracted self?
And how does MDMA do that?
I think it does it well. That's sort of like, how does MDMA?
Or why? Or like, what does it feel like? I guess. Like, does it feel like you're like, are you looking at the self that's contracted? does it give a perspective, or like what is for people that haven't been through those therapies or been a therapist in those therapies, what is that process?
Well, one of the principles that we teach when we're teaching this work is about the inner healing intelligence, right? And so it's our innate wisdom that moves towards healing, that if we can create the right atmosphere and the right conditions, then we move towards healing. We automatically move towards healing. And I've never seen it not happen, that somebody on MDMA doesn't contact that part of themselves that really says, this is what I actually want. And this is what I'm meant to do. It's our innate gift, right? Like that we can move towards healing, and that we just need the right conditions to do that. So I think what happens is that then we are able to then observe this part of us that does want that and does have that. And it's not really part of a traumatic self. It's ourselves before conditioning, right? Like what happened before conditioning, like who are we? Who is our essential self? And then that gives you a perspective that is so different, that it's like maybe even the beginning of perspective. When you think of perspective happens because of experience, right? Like the more we experience, the more perspective we can have. And that's why young little children don't have perspective, because they don't have the experience of life yet. And we gain perspective and perspective. When you have PTSD starting from a young age, you still don't have perspective as an adult, because it's been stunted, that emotional development, that growth. And so you still don't have perspective. It's really difficult to self-reflect. It's really difficult to be curious about yourself and others emotionally. And so when that possibility is there, like I can self-reflect. It's like all of a sudden, here I am, and I can see these other parts of myself, and I can see the parts of myself that have been holding this trauma, and I can see the parts of myself that are, hypervigilant, and the parts of myself that want to hide. But then I can also see the part of myself that is humorous, that is wise, that wants a lot of things in life. And so that just begins to, when you loosen that grip, you see all these parts inside of that contracted self, all the parts, the really, really difficult, challenging, traumatizing parts, and the amazing parts that have also been held back and have also been, put in the basement.
Right. And so you do these sessions that are MDMA assisted therapy sessions that are 8 hours long. And for the MAPS protocol, it's 2 or 3 sessions. Right. And does this happen for you, did this happen in the first session, or was it, and then once you see all these parts, is it just like healed, or are you just then spending the time outside of those 8-hour therapy sessions moving towards that? How does the actual healing feel?
I think it does begin to happen in the first session. And that to be able to kind of just begin to see some other aspect of yourself, some other part of you that you knew was there somehow, because I think once you encounter it, you go, oh, I recognize this somewhere. Somewhere I recognize this, right? So it just begins to have that possibility. And I think, you brought up shame before, and I think one of the parts that I feel is so shameful also about PTSD that a lot of times we don't talk about is that sometimes the symptoms of PTSD are the only thing that are truly ours. They're the only things that make us unique and are truly ours. And there's a shame around that because we do identify with it in some way. And so it's
It's almost like holding on to it on purpose in some ways, right?
In some ways,
Yeah.
of like,
Mm-hmm.
this is what's mine, and
Mm-hmm.
nothing else is mine because everything else has been taken away.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so here it is, this is mine. And that's very shameful.
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
creates a lot of shame. And so when you begin to say, oh, I get why that happened, I get it, but not I get it up here, but I get it in my heart. Like I am having a felt sense of what it's like not to have that shame, or I'm having a felt sense right now of what it's like to understand, really truly understand where that comes from. And that is a very different thing than just, I read it in a book, I know it. I mean, so many people come to therapy and they go, I know, I know.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's shame in, like, there's the shame in blaming yourself for the actual trauma, and then there's shame in actually holding on to the trauma memory as part of yourself. So there's like multi-level shame.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I do think that that's probably one of the hardest shames there is. It's like, I have in our studies, we've encountered a lot of participants who get to this one place and they get really, they're having like this beautiful experience, and there's growth happening and healing happening. And then it's like, I don't know how to be without PTSD. Like, what do I do? Who am I without PTSD? It's very scary. It's very scary. You know, I can say that I remember a very long time ago, it's been many, many, many years. I was writing to a friend a letter, and I mean, it's kind of emotional to even think about it, but I wanted to say that I was doing well, that I was okay, that I was happy. And it was so hard. It was so hard because I thought, if I say that, oh my God, you know, like, am I never going to get support? Am I never going to, like, does that mean I can never tell anybody I'm suffering? Does that mean, you know, what does it mean? What does it mean? But I just remember that feeling of, it's so hard for me to say I'm doing okay.
When was that?
It was probably 25 years ago.
And when was that letter in the context of the MDMA therapy sessions you were getting?
So it was probably, you know, I received the treatment a year before it was criminalized. So in 1984, I was 23 years old. And then a lot of, it just was the beginning of really understanding that there was a possibility to do this without, you know, without heavy drugs and without hospitalizations. And so it's somewhere around there, like maybe, I can't remember, you know, maybe 10 years later or something, I was able to write that letter. Yeah. And so I do get how scary it is to be okay.
Yeah. And so you wrote that letter, you sent it?
I did.
And then what happened?
She was so happy. My friend was so happy.
Amazing. So I also, I guess from you, so it's interesting how we met. So we met in person in the MAPS training for communities of color a year ago, in which I don't even remember what the prompt was, but there was some prompt that there was like 100 people in a room, and they said, like, turn to someone near you and like tell them something about yourself. Something like that. So I turned around and there you were. And I was like, oh, let me tell you about myself. Well, so I think I just started talking about my interest in trauma. Like, I came through neurology and had a lot of patients that had psychosomatic illness, and so they would have like a numb arm or a leg that they couldn't move, or seizures that were related to like trauma and mental health, and I became very interested in that through those patients, and then I became aware of MDMA assisted therapy and how important that is in the future treatment of trauma, and my own personal experience with having a parent with sexual trauma, so intergenerational trauma, and then my own experience learning that I have dyslexia at the age of 34, and how much I do feel like there's a lot of overlap with dyslexia and trauma. And then I learned that there's actually there's like 35% of dyslexics report childhood trauma. So there is like an actual overlap. But outside of like a main traumatic event, there is just the processing of the world that, if your brain works in a slightly different way, can be traumatic, in that there's like a difference of how you can receive stimuli, and if you have a different processing system, like analysts would describe trauma as a difficulty in processing a certain experience. So like there's these like micro traumas all the time that you're receiving audio, like auditory stimuli or visual stimuli, and they're not like going in properly. So there's like this disorientation you feel. And so we were given 5 minutes, and I was just like monologuing to you, and then I started crying, and it was like, oh, dyslexia was really stressful, and like my dad has dyslexia, and like there's this trauma is really stressful. And then they said, okay, stop, next person. And then you started talking and you had to do 5 minutes, and then you started saying like, well, I actually have dyslexia too, and then you started crying, and we were both crying, and everyone was crying. So I think I'm wondering from you I would love to hear about how you experience like the overlap of like cognitive diversity and dyslexia and trauma, and like how that, do you feel like that's influenced the way you have processed your own traumas, and is it its own trauma in itself, or?
It's definitely its own trauma, because I think it continues happening all the time. There's microaggressions constantly that happen with it's a discrimination that happens constantly. Somebody gives me a phone number and I don't get it. And if it's in a voicemail, that's good, because I can listen to the voicemail 8 times and finally get the phone number. But if it's like, okay, this is it, or like here, like there's a chat, and like there was no way that I could look at that. Like I listened to a little bit of Rick's conversation afterwards, and like he can look at the chat and he can talk to you and he can tell you about all these names of people that I would never know. That somebody says, well, don't you know blah blah blah, and I go, I don't know, and they go, really? And then they start talking about them, and I go, well, of course I know them, but I cannot capture names.
Yeah. And I listened to the Tim Ferriss interview with you recently, and he said like, what's your favorite poet or something? And you said, well, I have dyslexia, like I don't want to name things, and like most people are like, what does that have to do with dyslexia? Like,
exactly.
Reading, like you can't remember your favorite author, and you're like, no, it's a phoneme. It's like the phonemes don't stick. My sounds are not sticking. Right.
No, they do not stick. And so then what I grew up with was I was not smart. That was the feedback I got. My 6th grade teacher told that Mr. Salazar, I remember his name, that I remember.
He's the only person you remember.
And he told my mother, she is just not smart. You have to take her out of school and do something else with her. That was where I came from. That was the whole thing. And then what ended up happening was that I would tell myself, I'm not smart, but I can make people think I am if I do this and this and this. So I accommodated. And then I became an artist because dyslexia, well, one of the reasons I do love art, but I became an artist in a way because dyslexia is a plus for an artist, because
also there's no words in art, right?
Right. There's no acronyms. And you can actually, it's a plus because you have to begin to see the world differently, and you see things differently. And that was really helpful for me as an artist to see the world in a different way. But it wasn't until I went to college that I had a teacher in class say to me, you have a wonderful mind. And I just I thought he was talking to the person behind me. And I just thought, okay, like just like, it's okay. Like and I went like this because I thought, like, you know, I wanted them to see him. And I realized that there was nobody behind me and that he was talking to me.
Wow.
And I just was blown away. It was the first time at the age of 19 that I even had an inkling that I was smart.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so trauma, absolutely.
Right. And I guess I wonder if there's like, you know, if there's a certain number of people that can get the trauma stimuli, and only a certain percentage of them develop PTSD. It's like, are the people with dyslexia the ones that will like just automatically blame themselves? You know, there's like this like inward blame that just is inherent with, if you're like, my mind doesn't work the way it's supposed to, and only I really know how that looks, and it's really not okay.
It's shameful.
It's shameful, right?
It's shameful because if you don't remember the name of a person that you should know, it's shameful.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes you not smart.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't remember certain things, and if you can't capture, even now, you know, especially on Zoom, and we have meetings and people put things up and say, and they're going really fast, and like, this says this, and they're going, you know, I read very slowly, and I have to take things in. I have to read out loud to myself to understand it. And so when I see it and people are commenting on what just happened, to me, it's a total blurb.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
it's just
mm-hmm.
this, it's like Arab,
mm-hmm.
like Arabic things going through the screen, and I have absolutely nothing to say.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to work so hard at then printing it out, looking at it a million different times. You know, I write an email and I do it backwards, and I have to then wait, okay, now I have, oh, this sentence comes before this sentence. And people don't know that. People don't know that, you know.
Right. And if you compensate, like, and you know, you can make it seem like it's not a problem, but you're like, well, it took me 3 times the amount of time to do this same task as you. And so it's like, there's a lot of like hiding in rooms and like just doing the tasks so no one knows how long it takes you, you know. Which is I feel like if there's an overlap of trauma and dyslexia, it's like, it really, you're just like you're in that room, in the back room, you know, just like just typing your emails, like correcting spell check, you know.
Yes. Or like looking up the word, like, I have no idea what this word is.
Right. Or like trying to look up the word and the like Google doesn't even recognize it because it's so misspelled. It's like, you know, you're like, wait, I have to.
Yes, that happens to me quite a bit.
I can't even spell check. I have to like Google it and then spell check. Right. But I think it's interesting because I think there's so many people out there who have dyslexia. It's like, I think it's 7% of the population or something. And you don't hear about it because people don't want you to know. And there's so much shame in it that it's just like, those people are just like, there's like internalized bias that happens, that it's like, I don't want to be proud of it because I know how I've experienced it and it's not okay. So I'm just going to like not talk about it.
Yeah. And the world supports it, you know, even in small ways, like when you have children, they start doing these things where you probably are not there yet, but that you spell things with other mothers, you spell things out so that your child doesn't know. And so they'll say, this is the only one I knew how to do fast, which I'm really proud of. They would say, can Fika have a COOKIES?
Yeah, you're like, wait, no, you don't do that to me.
And I was so happy because I was the only one that I knew what it meant, and I can do it that fast. Like, that is like, I can't do any other one that fast. It was great. So I love to say COOKIES.
You practiced it. I love that. Yeah, it's totally true. That's happened to me before. People spell it out and you're like, what?
Like yes, she had that one.
Totally. Okay, so we've gone through shame, we've gone through dyslexia, we've gone through some of your early experiences. I feel like we're on like question 2 of my 20 questions, but so your understanding of like identity and growing up in Colombia, did it influence you a lot? Because I know there's a there's a lot going on in this country with race and identity, and does that change the way you see the world? I have a lot of Colombian friends. Some might be watching, so I just want
to. Well, I think, I left Colombia wanting to leave it behind. Mm-hmm. A lot of my trauma happened there. So I wanted to kind of leave it. Mm-hmm. And I left everything, like the culture. I wanted nothing to do. I thought, if I do that, then I'm going to be okay. Mm-hmm. And of course you're not. And of course I was a Colombian. Mm-hmm. And that part of me became shameful in some way. And so then it was sort of reclaiming some of that. And I've spent maybe the last 30 years reclaiming some of that. And like really being proud. I feel so proud of being a Colombian. Mm-hmm. And what is that for me? And for me, it was like magic realism was a big influence for me. I was able to really, the way that my mind could work was that I could make up the most wonderful stories and mm-hmm. scenarios, and I made up all these stories about ants, and so for me, magic realism saved me in many ways. Can you
describe what that is for people that don't know?
So like being able to have all these what you would call coincidences, for instance. So like to say, Garcia Marquez does that beautifully in his novels. Just like how one thing, like he taught, like in one of the things that he talked about was a city of ice, that they were imagining a city of ice because somebody came through their town and they had ice and they showed it to them. And so they could imagine this whole incredible city of ice that then where they would be cool because it was so hot in Macondo. Mm-hmm. And so that's part of it, right? Like there's all these stories that intertwine and that we can say, this happened because of this, or like these beautiful ideas that come together to form a reality. So it becomes a reality. And the thing is that those realities, those little connections are actually real. Like they do happen. And they have happened in our culture, like my mother lost touch with her very best friend, and they lost touch because they got married really young, and their husbands didn't let them be together and didn't let them, have a relationship. And so they lost touch with each other, and they became empowered to really go out and try to find a job at the same time. They hadn't seen each other 20 years or 15 years, and they answered an ad, and the ad was for like women who feel like they can feel really powerful, and they can do this particular job, and they can talk to people, and they can do all this. And they both answered the same ad and came to the agency and met each other again. That's magic realism, and that was true, and it happened, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's like being able to make up these beautiful stories, or to be
but like see the magic in the actual stories, right?
To see the magic in the actual stories. Mm-hmm. So that's what I got from Colombia. Mm-hmm. To be able to see the magic in all those stories, and it was really influential. And I think from indigenous cultures, I lived near the Arhuaco Indians for a while before I came to the United States, and I found a lot of healing there. And mostly it was a connection to non-ordinary states, like what non-ordinary states have to offer us, and the gifts that they have, and the wisdom that they have to inform us about us and about our world and our planet and what to do. I got that from them as well.
What's a non-ordinary state for people that don't know?
Well, I think usually we think that there's states, and that the states are waking state, sleeping state, dreaming state, intoxicating state. That's it. Those are the states. And so anything up beyond that, right? So when we're able to touch to something else, if we're touching to our collective experience, if I that's a non-ordinary state, right? That's part of anything that is not those that I just mentioned, then it's a non-ordinary state. And how do we relate to them? How do we relate to spirit when it comes up? How do we relate to a sense of ourselves that is different than what I know in this reality? How do I relate to that? You know, that's part of a non-ordinary state. And I think that's what happens, that we get information, and you can think of it in different ways, right? You get information from yourself, or you get information from God, right? Like it can be, it depends on what your background is too. It depends on where you come from. If where you come from is a place where healing happens through drumming, then the drumming allows you to get to that non-ordinary state. So it really depends also on your culture and what's there, how you see it, how you interpret the information that you're getting. If you believe in past lives, then maybe it feels like a past life is present, and I'm experiencing it that way, right?
Do you think most people have had non-ordinary state experiences?
Yes.
Unique.
Absolutely. I think if there's so many ways to have it, right? Like if you've had a child, you've had a non-ordinary state. Having a child is profound, right? You are definitely in a different reality, in a different sense of self. Though, you know, the fact that I could tell people like, it does not matter the way you're looking at me. It doesn't matter the way I look. It doesn't matter anything. Nothing matters. What matters is me in this process, having this child, right? So that's a non-ordinary state. Or people do it through meditation. People do it through that moment between sleeping and waking, that moment where you actually know you're awake and you're coming from a dream world, but you're conscious. That's a non-ordinary state. You know, you're conscious, but you're still connected to this other world that informed you in different ways.
So in a lot of ways, it can give you perspective on the limited way of thinking. When you're in an ordinary state, it's like maybe more closed, and non-ordinary seems to be like there are glimpses or moments that you can sort of see outside, or see the bigger picture, or see like different realms of experiences.
Yeah, that it opens up the potential to understand consciousness in a different way, and awareness in a different way, right? That it's like, what is my, you know, this idea of consciousness is such a big topic, right? Like, is consciousness made up in our minds, or where does it come from? And when people have like an out-of-body experience, right, that you can just say, that's, you know, I was in a different place. I was in a different place. My body was there. So somehow it's not really connected to my mind. It's just transmitting through my mind, but it's not made up there, right? And so how do we begin to get the valuable gifts from being in a non-ordinary state? And it's not necessarily that it's hallucinogenic. I mean, I think very few people actually hallucinate with MDMA, for instance, but it is a non-ordinary state, right?
So why do you think that people, so just starting a clinic in Philadelphia, there's so many therapists that are have decided this is what they want to do with their lives. You know, this is like, I'm sure you've seen this phenomena. And for me, it's been a learning experience to be like, well, what's going on in that? Like, do we really have not enough tools otherwise? Or is it just that effective? Or is it just inspiring to do something that's like outside of what we've known before? Just curious from you about why you think the momentum is being, is like, what's driving this momentum among therapists and the healing community?
You know, I mean, I think there's a lot of things driving it, right? And it depends where you fall in terms of is it a moneymaker? Like, can it get to that place where it can be a moneymaker? And we've seen that happen in different realms, in different ways that psychedelics have been treated. And are we in service of people? Do we want to service people? And I think in the mental health world, we have been hungry for other ways of treating people, especially when it's treatment resistant, right? Like when we do these methods that are treatment resistant, I you know, I have so many clients who have tried so many things, and this gave them some hope to begin to do a different process. And I don't think MDMA is for everyone. And I don't think MDMA is necessarily that every person that does it is going to find that it was helpful. Mm-hmm. I don't think, or any psychedelic, I don't believe that that's true. But it's another option. It's an option that wasn't there before. And it's an option that has a lot of promise, that has gotten good data results. So if you want to go the science route and if you want to go the data, here's the data, right? Here's the data. 76% is a huge amount when really the standard is way lower than that. Mm-hmm. So when you think of that and you're a clinician that goes, I have been working with this person for so many years and we have only gotten this far. And then that same person goes and does this treatment and all of a sudden everything breaks open and they do so much work in such a short period of time that can really help them be better in the world and have a better life. How could we not want that, right? Mm-hmm, how can we not want to be a part of that? So I think for the people who think like we do, who really want to help people and want them to feel better, it just seems so unethical not to want to do something, to have at least, if you don't want to do it yourself, to know about it enough to refer somebody to this work when it becomes legal, right? That it just seems so unethical. And I think that's what I thought at 23. It's like, it's unethical. It's unethical not to have this be available to all these people who are suffering.
And if someone wants to become a psychedelic therapist or an MDMA therapist and isn't yet like entering into MAPS training, what are the things that they can do to get to develop the skills necessary?
So, we do have so much of our, like the treatment manual, the protocols that are public, and it's being able to also say, okay, if I look at this, what am I missing that I can do in the meantime? How do I do my own work so that I can be, how do I know like my emotional landscape? How do I become so aware of that so that I can be aware of somebody else's emotional landscape and I can really help them? So I think it's, a lot of it is your own work and then reading about it so that you can think, oh, like I see that, for instance, this work brings up a lot of somatic. Somatic is so important in treating trauma. And like, do I need to take workshops or trainings in somatic work? What is the work? But especially the work with ourselves, right? That part of how we create a brave space is by us being brave to come to that space too, and to know that we can hold what is coming, what is happening in the session, that we can hold what the other person is going through, and that is how we can help them, right? That's one way that if we can't hold it, then trauma can happen. Trauma can happen. That it's such a, it's so vulnerable to be in front of somebody else when you're in a non-ordinary state. And so for us as clinicians, how do we really honor that? How do we, it's that they're so suggestible too. And so how do I hold that? And it's the right use of power, right? Like how am I humbled by this experience, and how can I hold that place? And how how am I so really aware of my power in this moment and not to abuse that power?
Right, and acknowledge that there is power, and that there
Yes,
is like,
absolute
there are parts
power.
of yourself you don't know, and those can be dangerous if you haven't looked into them.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I think that that is an incredibly important piece while you're waiting, and that you read things that are important to you and that you're drawn to, you know, like a lot of the ways that I read, the things that I read that are inspiring to me and that help me in my work are things that actually inspire me. So if I pick up maybe a psychology book, I'm not going to be so inspired. I'm going to read a page and fall asleep, and it's just not my thing, right? But reading about somebody's life and the way they move through the world, and people's coping strategies and people's way of being in the world, to me, that's incredibly exciting, and I can read it and it can inform my work. So it's more about reading and doing what you love, and what inspires you, so that then you can then use some of that for what you need. And if you want to serve people, you're going to be inspired by people.
Yeah. And can you talk a little bit about how you use art in the treatment sessions?
Yeah. So, you know, one of the things about doing research is that you have to follow a certain protocol, right? And there's a beautiful thing about that, and about the science of it, and about the data. And there's some parts that are also restricting of like what we can do and can't do. And but there is room to bring ourselves in and our own skills. And so I don't offer it to everybody. I don't even necessarily bring it up, unless very few times have I actually suggested it. But maybe somebody either knows that about me, or somebody just says, oh, if I could just like, I don't know how to describe it, but if I could just draw it, I'm not even an artist, but if I could just, like, I can see the color, and I'm like, okay, do you want to do that? And they say yes. And then I have the pad and all the materials right there, just waiting. And so I can bring them out. And I've had some participants do beautiful, beautiful processing through art. And you know, I had this one guy that I just remember his picture, because I took a picture of it, and he had lined up his whole process around the bed on the wall. He taped it all up, the whole process from the beginning to the end of all his drawings. And he was just laying on the bed, and it was just such a beautiful process that had no words. And it was just expression, you know, expression, one to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. And that it started off with all this feelings and rage inside this box. There were all these lines that were black, black, black. And at the very end, that box was open. There was just one little tiny green leaf.
Nice.
That has, you know, how do you describe that except in that?
And I think a lot of like experiences, and especially traumatic experiences, are pre-verbal. So if you don't have the language and you need to express them, art is really the way you can do that. It's like, it can be in your body, and it can also be expressed in art. But if it's something that's like before language or beneath language in a lot of ways in your mind, we have to find ways of bringing that out.
Yeah. And there's a lot of ways to do it, right? Like sometimes, you know, I have a drum in my office, and sometimes people can drum what it felt like, you know, like this is how it felt like when my dad was walking into my room, for instance, and he was the abuser, and this is what it felt like. And it was like drumming it. That's also, you know, I mean, there's so many ways that we can express that are not necessarily linguistic, and that have so much power, and that then the person can also feel there's a sense of being empowered, right? Because I was able to let you know what it was like, even though I could never have the words for it. So there is a sense of feeling empowered in that process as well.
Yeah, it's really important. I guess some of the final questions I have for you is, how do we make sure that there's inclusion of different groups in these trials and then post-approval, and why is that important?
That's a huge question. Well, I mean, important because we have untreated PTSD amongst marginalized communities more than anywhere else. And so how can we possibly exclude them? There's so much untreated PTSD and so much trauma that continues and continues and continues, and that they live through day in and day out. So one is like, there's no question about it, right? And then the other is then the commitment that it takes to really say, what do I need to do to make this happen, right? And that what we need to do involves being so aware and so willing to understand what are the things that were in place to make it so difficult for them to come to us, for people from marginalized communities. I mean, when you think about that the police can inject somebody with 500 milligrams of ketamine to sedate them, and that most of those people that's happening to are Black or Hispanic, then of course there is this huge piece there that we need to address. And how do we make it so that it is brave enough? Because we can't create a safe space, but we can create a brave space where people can come genuinely and speak, right? But we need to consider all that. What are the stigmas? What are the things that came before for them, for their community, for their parents? How have they been treated in the mental health system? How have they been treated in the mental health system that makes it so difficult? And there's such fear around it. So completely understandable. How do we start there, right? That we can't just start on step 10. We have to go to step 1 and really build that up. And, how do we do it? And I know.
How do we do it?
How do we do it? So I think it's, if you have it as a commitment, then it's not just an intention. We've been talking about it in our own space, in our own clinic. How do we do this? And it's, how do we not take something away from them in order to create something? How do we not say, well, you need to come here and we're going to show you and we're going to tell you, and that really, that it's not about, I'm going to help you heal and I'm going to provide this for you. It's more that your liberation is tied to my liberation. They're tied together, and so that we can work together. That's one way to do it, that it's tied. It's not I'm here and you're there and I'm going to help you and I'm going to do these things, but that your liberation is tied to mine. And therefore I'm invested in it. I'm invested in it because your healing is my healing, right? And can help heal our collective shame and our collective trauma, right? So I think that's one way. Bruce, my husband, who's also mycotherapist and myco-trainer, he said clinical sites need to match the demographics of their communities. How do we make that happen? And that one of the ways that he comes from a place where he was able to, when he worked with clinics and bringing a midwife program to marginalized communities, is how do we go to them? How do we have a clinic in the middle of where they are, so that they don't have to come out of their community to come to me? We can go to them. And so that's a really great idea. How do we begin to have maybe days where we can go, on these days we go to the clinic in this part of Denver where there's the community of the marginalized communities that can go to the community there that already can trust that place, right? Instead of
Mhm.
trying to then tell them that they have to forget about everything that they've learned how to trust, or the ways that they've learned how to do things, or ways that their ancestors and their communities have healed, have done, how have they done healing, how have they dealt with grief, and to learn that and to incorporate that, instead of just saying you have to forget all that and I'm going to tell you how we do it over here in the little white neighborhood.
And also just acknowledging the historical ethical violations against Black communities in this country, and the war on drugs that were targeting Black communities, and now we're saying like, yeah, this is fine, it's legal, or it's about to be legal. It's like the whole context is very scary to people that need it the most. And
it's just like, oh, come over.
Yeah, come be part of a research trial. And it's, I think that some people say like, well, why don't we just do the thing, get it approved, and then try to bring people in who most need it? And it's like that, that's not okay, because then the whole ripple effect of who gets access, and like who the therapists identify as who's going to come as patients. And the whole thing is, you don't want to leave someone out of an effective therapy, but it's also hard to justify when it's still in research, because you can't say like, I'm 100% sure this works. I think it works. Like the numbers say it works, but it's not proved yet. Yeah. There's a lot of ethical dilemmas with like inherent within that, the whole process. And I think,
and how do we make cultural accommodations?
Right.
If we are inviting them in, what are those cultural accommodations that need to take place so that it is welcoming, so that it is welcoming, and that we can say, well, we don't do that here, but yes, we do that here if these are the people that you're going to work with, right? Like if I'm working with a particular community of people, then what are the things that they need that then I need to accommodate if I want to treat them, if I think it's important to treat them. It's not just, it goes way beyond the intention and getting the person there even. Yeah, it's what do we do after the person is there?
Right. And then if you're treating a trauma, do you have like a safe place that people can go to metabolize the therapy that they've just received? There's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be built out for people that are the most traumatized. Yeah. Anything else that you want to say in this segment? I'm sure we'll have another conversation at some point soon. And also that, at some point we'll announce that we're going to do a big project together that people will hear about.
I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, me too.
It's what I want to say. That we really are this. I always go like, what can I say that is not cliche? If you're interested in this work, it's worth it. It's really worth it. And you don't have to be interested in it to know about it, so that there will be a time when you can refer somebody to it, right? That is part of what we can do. Like I refer people out, right, to things that I don't do necessarily. So you don't have to be completely like invested in being a psychedelic psychotherapist, but it is sort of like when I was talking about creating brave space, one of the ways that we create that is by being informed about what's out there and being up to date about what is the latest things that are happening, even in this research, right? And so that's one way that we can help our communities, and we can help the liberation of each other. Is we don't have to do it ourselves, but it is really important to know. And I do think that there is a renaissance, and that it's important to understand that and to know it.
And I think for me, as someone who went through medical school and then 2 residencies and psychoanalytic training, and I've done a lot of I've had a lot of career paths that have sort of ended up in this area. In a lot of ways, it's like I found in psychedelic therapy the mentors that I was always looking for, like you, and people that are inspiring, and people like McLane and Mithofer who can like really speak to using your own ethical compass to decide, like, is this an okay way to go about this therapy? What does this patient really need? And it's like that, to me, it felt like what's been missing in medical education is like, there's all these formulas and like, this is how we go about this thing. And no one's actually thinking about like, well, this is sort of outside of the realm of what I would normally do, but I will do it this time because this person really needs me. Or, you know, this isn't something I really have the expertise in dealing with, but no one else is helping them. And I think I can do it. And like, I'm going to do everything within what I know is safe for this person. And it's like, oh, you know, is there a way that you can really be the kind of healer you wanted to be all along? And surround yourself with people that are inspiring and really going about this work in a, you know, in an ethical and like thoughtful way. And to me, it feels like there's a community really developing, and it's really inspiring. And I'm really excited to work with you and other people in the space.
And I want to say I'm sorry that I couldn't really like look at the chat and talk to you at the same time. I would be complete. It would not work. It would not work.
Yeah, I think we did answer some of these things. It's like,
okay, good.
We use art, psychedelic journeys without the assistance of a guide. I don't know if we answer that question. I think you should have some sort of guide. That's my answer. Yeah, people saying thank you. And also, if anyone has questions, just email us at info@soundmind.center and we can like pass them along to Marcela.
Okay.
And you'll be back. I'm going to like, you know, I hope we have many conversations. So
thank you so much. And thank you so much for the work that you're doing and for bringing this out. Education is such a big piece of it too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Hey guys, I'm back. So we have 2 more people that we're gonna bring on tonight. This next person is a surprise guest, but also someone you may remember from a previous Solidarity series. So Sarah Cohen is going to come on and talk to us a little bit about Rosh Hashanah, given that today is the second day of a high holiday in the Jewish tradition. And Sarah is working with us at Sound Mind Center. She is a internal medicine physician and clinical herbalist, and practices integrative medicine, and has some incredible views about many different things. And so we keep having her back, and she's telling us about different aspects of life and healing. So I am going to invite her on right now. See if it works. Hello. Wait, let me unmute you. You're muted. Oh, hey. Yes, I can hear you. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Shana Tova.
Shana Tova. I love that you're like wearing a sweater in your like magical mystical forest back there.
Right?
I love it. So yeah, I'm excited because being Solidarity series, we're trying to be in solidarity with many different areas of like society, and paying attention to how different things intersect with I guess marginalized status. And I feel like not saying something about Rosh Hashanah, given that it's the second day of Rosh Hashanah, would be amiss. So I would love to talk to you a little bit about how Rosh Hashanah may intersect with this concept of solidarity, and like, what do people do when they're in this holiday? Like, what can we be doing?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you. I really appreciate this opportunity to reflect on this. And as always, your questions are so intriguing, and it's just been a great exercise to even think about the intersection of Rosh Hashanah and solidarity, and just like an educational opportunity for me. So thanks. So we could first start with just a simple kind of introduction. Rosh Hashanah is, in the Jewish tradition, it's the new year, and it of course has deep significance in that it's essentially the birthday of the creation of the universe from the void. And so and I'm actually finding a lot of richness in that concept this year, in that contained within the darkness there is a new beginning. Mm-hmm. And that all of creation came from a dark and chaotic void. I think that concept is kind of relatable, maybe for many of us right now.
Is the pandemic the dark void?
Yes, the pandemic is the dark void, and like all of the political unrest in this country, and just a lot coming to the surface right now, and so yeah, I think that maybe coming to the surface is the beginning of creating something new, actually. Maybe emerging from the darkness a little bit. But the direct translation of Rosh Hashanah is the head of the year, which is maybe some birth symbolism right there, which I like. And so yeah, just this notion, reflecting on this notion that uncertainty and unrest can be fertile grounds if we cultivate it intentionally, and that there are actions for doing that. And I think one of these actions for doing that is linking ourselves to collective trauma and collective struggle, and acknowledging that, and then having actions towards creating a new paradigms, perhaps new beginnings. So, and that's a theme of Rosh Hashanah is freshness, new beginnings, and right now it's a fresh opportunity. Rosh Hashanah is marked by the new moon on the first day of the first month of the new year. And what's said about this time is that the gates are open, and that can be interpreted in a lot of different ways. The way that I interpret it in my practice is that the gates to the divine are open, and there's a closeness in communication there. And in the Jewish tradition, it's an opportunity for reckoning, really, and atonement, and personal reflection. So it's called the days of awe, the days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. There's a 10-day period where the gates are open, and those are the days of awe. And it's a really profound and powerful time of personal reflection and reckoning.
And what are the what is the 10 days of making amends or reckoning? Like, what do people do? Like, am I supposed to be saying sorry to everyone, or like
that is one thing. And I think it's so what's really interesting to me is Rosh Hashanah is also called Yom Teruah, which is the day of raising our voices. And so this is the day when we blow the ram's horn, the shofar, and it's this far-reaching blast that's carried through the atmosphere. And what's carried on this sound is like many different things. It's the voice of grief. It's the voice of it can be lamenting, it can be mourning, it can be joy, it can be celebration. But it's this really loud blast that's sort of a wake-up call also. And this, in terms of solidarity, I like to think of it as an opportunity to raise our voices for communities who may have been silenced or oppressed or marginalized, and so their voices aren't heard, but they can be if we raise our voices in solidarity with these communities, or anyone identifying as being oppressed or marginalized. So that's one thing, and that's the first day of blowing the shofar, making a really big sound.
Did you not bring your shofar to show us?
I did not. I actually don't have a shofar, but this year I decided I really want one. I want to blow the shofar for sure. But yeah, you asked about like other actions, like what are actions that we can do, and in the Jewish tradition, it's very explicit what we do during these 10 days. And I mean, again, it's really relatable. This isn't like a Jewish thing. It can be done at any time, really. But in my religious tradition in Judaism, it's just there's a specific kind of calendar for doing this. And so one of the things is teshuvah, which is the direct translation of that is returning. And I interpret this as returning to goodness. And this is atonement, and this is when making amends, and it's the time to reflect on ways that we may, and I can say it for myself, that I may have unwittingly, maybe intentionally sometimes, contributed to something harmful or a misstep or unskillful behavior, and take the opportunity to apologize, to acknowledge and recognize that I had unskillful behavior. And then there's also a component to it of it's like not all harm is caused intentionally, so just checking in and thinking, how may I be unintentionally contributing to structural oppression, and how can I make reparations for that? So that's one way. And one way to actually make reparations is tzedakah, and that word translates to righteousness, or like right behavior. And it's this concept of sort of a moral obligation to contribute, and it specifically refers to financial contributions. And so this is a good time, since the gates are open. It's a good time to make contributions to communities who have been marginalized and have to work harder to be seen or to succeed. And I can give them money. And you had asked me about when we were communicating about this prior to right now, you had mentioned just like, recognizing privilege as a piece of this. And yeah, I mean, there's a way to just acknowledge that maybe you have more than someone else, and you can give. And it doesn't, it's just a step of reparation. And then, yeah, sorry, go ahead. Did you have another?
Well, I feel like this might be like taking another turn, but I think I have been thinking a lot about just the concept of intergenerational trauma, and how the whole concept of that whole concept sort of was recognized because of Holocaust victims and their children and their grandchildren, and how this trauma was being passed on from one generation to the next in various ways, whether it's like the way someone relates to food or how they're interacting with their surroundings. It's like it can get picked up by their kids and then their kids, and it's this generational experience. And I think in a lot of ways that's lent itself, like that knowledge has then carried into psychedelic therapy. I think a lot of those concepts are very central to psychedelic therapy, but it also is helping us understand the the intergenerational trauma of Black people in this country, and how, you know, it's not, you know, slavery goes away and then it's not, and there are still microaggressions and traumas that happen, but even if there weren't, there's still this like generational trauma that has to be addressed, and that there's like just a lot of relationships between, you know, the Jewish tradition and the current understanding of psychology and psychedelics, and, you know, what is privilege and where people fall on the privilege spectrum now, in different groups, you know, just recognizing that it's not necessarily cut and dry, but that you really have to examine yourself and say, you know, there's certain aspects of myself that aren't privileged, and then there's other ones that are, and not necessarily just latch on to the not privileged ones, you know, like I'm a woman or I'm dyslexic, but I'm also white and I also have like 1 million degrees, and, you know, I have the possibility of earning power even if I choose not to take it. You know, there's a lot that is that involves self-reflection and really looking into yourself about like, what is my place in the world and what do I owe other people, and what is the, you know, what are amends and what are reparations. And I think this is a really important time to reflect on that, especially given what's happening in this country, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate what you're saying there. And also just speaking to the multifaceted nature of self-reflection, you know, like there are so many ways that we like have narratives about ourselves, and, you know, some of them are trauma and woundedness. And then that can also coexist with privilege, which, you know, doesn't always have to be a negative thing or a criticism. And in fact, there is one ritual in this very profound and intense 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, where there is opportunity for gratitude and, you know, the apples in the honey, dipping apples in honey and appreciating what sweetness there is, and you know, having gratitude for the ways that life is good. So there's that too. And then that is coupled with all the ways that reparations need to be made, amends need to be made. There is profound mourning. And so, yeah, there's a lot to address. And, you know, I think like creating this forum, like what you're doing right now, and then creating models for people to process this trauma in unconventional ways through, well, now unconventional, but hopefully they will be the convention moving forward, in, you know, ways to just, you know, reconstruct the multifaceted nature of being human in this world in a way that we can come correct and celebrate and look out for each other all at the same time. But it's hard, you know, it's really hard to do that when you're carrying this generational trauma. And so, you know, I appreciate that you're creating avenues for actualizing, you know, the processing of trauma.
Yeah. Would you say that, like somebody who's not Jewish, would it be totally weird for them to engage in aspects of the Days of Awe? Like, is that like cultural appropriation? Is it like offensive, or is it totally open to engage?
That's a great question. And I think every person might have a different answer to that. I personally, I love the idea that is part of a lot of Reconstructionist Judaism and Jewish renewal, of this idea of a Judaism of inclusion. And so I want people to participate in these rituals and, you know, learn about these traditions, and, you know, with reverence, of course. I personally wouldn't consider it appropriation, but I can't speak for anyone else. But I definitely gravitate towards this Judaism of inclusion and, you know, inviting people in. So
yeah, definitely our local synagogue, Kol Tzedek, is extremely inclusively minded, and in West Philly. So if anyone's curious, they're pretty rad.
Yeah, and they definitely invite people who have all different identities, and it doesn't mean that you need to like merge identities necessarily, but, you know, you can come and you can represent yourself as an individual in a community that has these traditions and participate in them. And yeah, I think that is a beautiful thing. I love it when people take interest.
Yeah, yeah. I also think it's important to mention, like, you can make amends and apologize to someone even if you didn't mean to hurt them, right? I think that in like being from an analytic tradition and like this concept of like implicit bias and microaggressions, it's like just because you didn't mean to do it and it's not in your conscious awareness, but you hurt someone, you can still apologize and acknowledge that it hurt someone even if you didn't realize you were doing it at the time.
Yeah. Yeah, and that, I mean, and that's real work, I think, because there's humility in that, I think, just being like, I didn't do this on purpose, but I did do it. And I'm sorry. And I think that's the work, right? I think that's a really important piece of reparations, is just being like, how am I upholding harm here?
Or like a structure of inequality, or like some power dynamic that, you might be benefiting from and don't even know you're creating it. Yeah. So what does it look like to, like, for the next 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, what are people actually doing? Are they just like singing? Are they writing letters with apologies? Are they like,
I mean, it's individualized, but yeah, I mean, I think there are some, there's active reflection, a lot of introspection, like looking back on the past year and how have I affected my community? How has my community affected me? What is going on in the world? And what, and having a moral obligation to participate in like a helpful way. So it really is a lot of thinking and reflection, and but then there's also there's a really beautiful ritual. It's called Tashlik, and it's that translates to casting off. And I love doing this ritual. You're welcome. You come and join me if you want. I'll tell you what it is. I don't know if you've ever done it before, but it's basically you take some bread and you go to a river and you just take pieces of the bread off and you cast them into the river, and you it's like a ceremonial casting away of things that don't serve anymore. And I'm sort of like reframing this interpretation a little bit. So I'm taking a little bit of liberty to reframe it. I don't really like talking about sin per se, right. But that's the tradition is basically repenting for sin. But I think of it as a time of reflection, thinking about what in this chaotic time, in this darkness right now, that is the void. What do we want to cultivate? So what do we want to bring forward, and what do we want to let go of? And just going through this action of ritual, I think is really powerful. And
I think that a lot of the rituals are really based on like mental health needs, right? Like if you need to let go of something, how do you actually go through the physical process of like, what does it look like to let go of things you don't need anymore? And I think a lot of religions have sort of used that rituals for that purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think ritual is so powerful. And just like approaching something with intention like that, and then just seeing something through from opening the ritual to closing it, and then like going through the motions, like you're saying, that really has like a feeling and an action, and incorporates an experience with it. So but yeah, I mean, I think this is just, it's really, it's just a time of deep reflecting, and I really appreciate that it welcomes all of the elements of reflection. So it's not all happy and joyous, but there is some of that there. And it's but then there's also there's an opportunity to mourn, and I think that's so important, just having like this ritual grieving that isn't so much part of like modern American culture, and I think it's something that is missing. So I really appreciate the opportunity to go through the motions of acknowledging all of the facets of this human condition.
It's a condition. This year is a condition.
Yeah, also, like in the context of healing trauma, like on a personal level, there is a lot to say for kind of like self-actualization and doing the work on a personal level. But I think that's not all of it. I mean, I don't think that any level of self-actualization will actually do everything that needs to be done on behalf of the collective. So there is this important part of tuning in to what you were just talking about, the generational trauma, the collective trauma, the burden that we're all carrying right now in this last year that has been associated with a lot of change and grief and loss. So yeah, and then I mean that's sort of a theme that I'm really focusing on, is how can we advocate for one another and link into one another and like pray for somebody else, not necessarily just ourselves. And that is a piece of the services too, is the walking up to the Torah to say a prayer on behalf of everyone who might be suffering from a certain ailment or carrying a certain burden. And so it's kind of like praying on and singing on behalf of the collective.
It's really beautiful.
I agree. Yeah.
So I guess it's important also just to think about, like, if you are following these next 10 days, it's like the Rosh Hashanah, which is today's the second day. It's like you're sort of going into this like deep reflection, and then Yom Kippur in 10 days is like this big celebration. Like, everyone's like atoned, but this is like the serious time. We're all being pretty serious,
It is pretty serious, and we're really preparing to atone. So like really the beginning of Yom Kippur is actually the time to atone. So this is really the days leading up to Yom Kippur are the time to reflect and kind of prepare your atonement and kind of like create the bundle that is going to be your offering of atoning, of apologizing, of making amends. And then comes the big celebration,
right.
Which is a big, I mean, it's a lot to celebrate, and it's ushering in something new, and it's a lot of time invested in how can we transform all of the things that we're mourning and grieving into, welcoming this new year that is full of possibility, especially if we devote action towards creating something good.
Well, I'm excited for something new.
I'm definitely excited for something new, but I'm spending a lot of time thinking about what I want to create, and I'm sitting over here feeling very excited about what you're creating and listening to your conversations today, and just thinking about like how much is possible. There's just like so much on the horizon that's changing, and
yeah, I'm excited too. We're also developing a medicinal garden on Spruce and 46 if anyone wants to come see in the coming months. Sarah will teach you about plants. I'll be there learning. Yeah, cool. I'm excited. Do you have any like reading materials if people want to read more, or people that you like to
You mean specifically about Rosh Hashanah or just in general? Well, there's a rabbi by the name of Jill Hammer who is just doing amazing things with making a more relevant Judaism in terms of equity and representing the voice of the feminine, which is unfortunately not represented in the most wonderful ways historically in Judaism, but it's there, and she really just like summons it. And she has a lot of books. She's coming out with a new book soon. So she does a lot of just reframing of the patriarchal Jewish model into stories of the feminine voice that are there. They are there, but they're not really amplified historically. So,
cool.
Yeah, I love her, Jill Hammer.
Jill Hammer. All right. Cool. I'm sure we'll see you again. And thank you for sharing everything. I'm really excited to work with you. And Shana Tova.
Shana Tova. See you soon, Hannah.
See you soon. Thank you. All right, so we got one more person, last but not least. We're going to finish up this series with Aubrey Howard, who is an amazing transformational breath facilitator. And she's going to lead us, she's going to spend part of the time describing what breath work is, and then leading us through some a session that we can sort of try to metabolize some of the stuff we've learned today. And she has finished up, I think, almost every one of the Solidarity series, because it's just a really wonderful way to process some of the things that we're learning. And we're really happy to have her back. And you can find her website at spiritmedicine.com. And if you want to get in touch with her for more sessions and personal sessions, you can also just email us at info@soundmind.center, and we'll find her for you. So I'm going to bring her on. Hi. Let's see. Are you muted?
Perfect. Can you
There
hear
you
me
are.
now?
I can. Ooh, you're relaxing over there.
Hi, Hannah. How are
Hi.
you?
Good. How are you?
Wow, so wonderful to be back with you guys. I've missed the Sound Mind Center since our last workshop together.
Yeah. It's really. I'm really excited to do another breathwork session with you.
Yes, and it is such a great way, I agree, to end out the day. You guys have had an incredible lineup of speakers thus far. I actually just popped on about 20-30 minutes ago for Sarah Cohen, and it was incredible learning that history and that the Jewish tradition. I'm half Jewish, so
amazing.
and I don't know much about it, honestly, so incredible. It really helped me a lot, and thank you again for having me here tonight.
Awesome. Yeah, so I'll take my video off, and I'm going to practice along with you, and then let me know when you want me back on.
Perfect. And Hannah, does the sound quality sound good to you right now?
It sounds great. Yep.
Okay, perfect. Virtual world, we just got to check in. Thank you. All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me tonight. And we had such an incredible lineup of speakers for the Sound Mind Solidarity series. And such incredible work that Hannah and the team is doing to bring psychedelic therapy into our culture and into underprivileged areas. And for me, it makes such a big impact to be here with you tonight. And I'm really excited to get the chance to connect with ourselves more deeply. Some things that we don't get to do enough is taking the time to nourish ourselves, to let go of what's happening around us, and to tune into the true answers and all of the messages that we have within. And so to begin, what we'll do is first start off with taking a few moments to do a centering breath. And then from there, we're going to spend some time going through what transformational breath is. I'll tell you guys a little bit about how it has affected me, how I even got started in this practice. I think that it is really important to hear each other's stories. Storytelling is really fundamental to human nature. And in our culture, our society, I feel that we don't do that enough. So I'd love to tell you guys a little bit about my story, how I got started on this journey, and how it's led me here with you today. And now this is the beginning of your journey in this new process of healing that we've been on since we were born. And so to begin, if everybody can sit up, I encourage you to cross your legs if possible. If you, any way that you need to sit to be comfortable is totally fine. And we'll begin just by taking a centering and clearing breath together. So you can bring your hands to your knees. Also, you'll see me adjust the camera a little bit since we're virtual and the microphone so that you guys can hear me well. And once you're here, just start by first inhaling, rolling your shoulders up towards your ears. And exhale, rotate them down and back. Good. Inhale all the way up. Exhale, bring the shoulder blades to touch. And then switch directions. So behind. Exhale them forward and down. Beautiful. One more time, just like that. Taking your time. There's no need to rush. Nothing to do and nowhere to go. Good. And then you can inhale, bring your arms all the way to the sky. And exhale, rotate them down. Good. One more time like that. Deep breath in. Smile at the sky, grateful for the privilege. And exhale, releasing down. Good. And then you can bring your hands in front of you and interlace your fingers. And then flip your hands, draw your chin towards your chest. And then inhale, rotate the arms to the sky. A little wiggle from side to side, just opening up the rib cage, getting ready to breathe deeply into the body. Good. Allow the hands to drop down and rest by your sides. And then lastly, go ahead and rotate the head back and slowly bring it around and down towards the chest. And see if you can inhale in one direction and exhale in the other. Good. Taking your time. Making it really easy and soft. Good. And then the other direction, switching sides. Allow the shoulders to become heavy, the neck relaxed. Notice any little pockets of tension or any little crunchiness in the body and let it naturally find release. And then next time your chin comes towards your chest, let it hang for a moment. Take a deep breath in through your nose and exhale. Beautiful. Inhale, slowly rolling the head back up. And then bring one hand to the heart and one to the low belly. Good. And once you're there, take a deep breath in through the nose. Exhale through the mouth. Let some space come into the body. Inhale. Exhale, letting go. Beautiful. One last time. Deep breath in, opening the heart. And exhale. Symbolic gesture of release. Good. And so whenever you're ready, you can allow your eyes to stay closed and now just begin to take some natural breaths right where you are at. breathing in and out through your nose, and noticing how it is you feel in this moment. Really tuning into the present moment experience. And then with your next inhale, noticing which part of your body rises and falls with your inhale and your exhale. Is it your belly that opens gently? Or is it your chest that gently rises when you breathe in? Just beginning to notice where you are at in this moment. Not judging yourself. Inviting an acceptance for where you are at. Good. Then when you're ready, you can allow your hands to come back to the sides. Maybe begin to gently open your eyes. You did such a good job, even for that little breath, right? Just a moment of taking time to clear your energy, to tune into what is it that I'm experiencing, what is it that I'm even feeling, is so tremendously powerful. So just showing gratitude for being here today, being here in this moment with you and I. Good. And so as we move into this session tonight, I always want to begin by acknowledging the land that we are on. So I'm here in Pennsylvania, in Fishtown specifically, and it was the Lenape tribe, it is the Lenape tribe, who have been the stewards of this land for thousands of years and been here to really cultivate what it is that we know now as Philadelphia, right? Our city. And so important and necessary to show our respect to them and to the ones who have been here to guide us along the way. Excuse me. And throughout time, we know that people have come in and taken from the natives, taken from the indigenous, raped us of our lands, of our cultures, of our languages. And so beautiful to be here and to acknowledge that before we begin our session. And also, I always like to hold a guiding intention for us all here tonight to really understand that it is a privilege to have the opportunity to be free to express who we are. And so I breathe and we breathe tonight for all those who cannot, for all of those who have had their lives taken from them. And so I hope that you share that intention with me tonight as we move through our session. And so if you were here the last few series or you've joined any of my workshops, then you might know a little bit about what we're doing tonight. But if not, it's such a great opportunity to try something new and to experience something that is out of your comfort zone, which really pushes us and helps us to grow tremendously. And so in tonight's session, first, we are going to spend some time uncovering really what's going on inside, right? How is it that we're feeling? And how can breath really be a main answer, a way and a tool that can guide us through some of the traumas that we face? Because as we know, there are so many people in this world that experience tremendous amount of trauma, and we all do on some level. And this is really what has helped me to understand the way that breath is so powerful for us. And so from here, really what happens is the main premise is that we go through life and we suppress feelings and memories constantly in an attempt to move throughout the world. And every time this happens, it's as if we're putting small rocks in a plastic bag and swallowing them one by one until we become heavy and dense in nature. See, we have expressions like my heart is heavy, or I feel low, to explain the feeling of these low vibrations within our bodies. And so in a session, we draw in a high quantity of life force energy into the body, which actually produces a strong positive energy vibration that alters the body's electromagnetic field. So in this process, negative energy is raised to the positive. And through this process, we have the opportunity to allow our emotions to release, to be experienced and connected with, and then integrated into our lives. And so we can't change the things that have happened to us, right? We all wish that we could. We wish we could undo things in the past so that we could have an easier or a better or more successful or more abundant future, right? But that's not the case in this reality. And so if we can't change the things in the past, we do have the chance to change how we feel about the things that have happened to us. And there lies our power. And so one of the most important things in life is to express the heart, which frees up the emotions to experience the power of loving. And when the emotions are blocked, they're like unpolished metal, dense and cloudy, not really allowing in that light and that beauty. And so when our emotional arteries are blocked up, our heart becomes jammed in the same way. So no wonder so many of us have issues around love and relationships, especially with the self. Trying to love without emotion is like trying to drive a car with a seized up engine, or like running a marathon with a collapsed lung. See, though, for those who were raised to express emotion naturally and spontaneously, a dynamic emotional life is like exercise to an athlete, right? It just comes naturally. But for those of us, which is the majority, who are raised to repress, suppress, and deny our emotions for many different reasons, many external factors, right? This process can be as painful as it is for an out-of-shape athlete to get back into prime condition. So feelings are not just an idea or an abstraction. They are physical manifestations of energy, right, that actually unite the mind and the body. And so unexpressed, repressed, they become toxic. And without release, essentially, they manifest as lumps, tumors, migraine headaches, cysts, spasms, right? A wide variety of physical symptoms. And really the challenge is not to transcend our emotions, but it is really to befriend them and to express our feelings with purity and directness in the moment. So it's about presence, gaining full presence with ourselves so that we can be present with the world around us, not stuck in our default mode network, ruminating about the past or thinking about the future, right? Simply being here. And that really relates to us finding time to learn about the expansiveness of our inner terrain. And so the beauty here is that in Transformational Breath and what we'll do tonight, there is a law in quantum physics called the law of entrainment. Excuse me, I'm going to take a sip of water. And tonight we're going to be breathing through our mouth, which I will tell you the reason for in a minute. So it is nice to have some water on hand and maybe even some chapstick. That's what I prefer. Also some pillows. So we're just spending a little time now going through, what is it that we're doing, right? Like what is actually going to happen? What are the reasons for this? And then from there, move on to the energetic level, the vibrational level, where we can actually begin the process of clearing some of these emotions. So if you guys like science, this is really the part that interests me the most, because I'm very interested in bridging the gap between science and spirituality. And I told you guys I was going to tell you a little bit of a story. I got a little sidetracked, so I would love to tell you quickly how I got started in this practice. And so it was about, what year was it? I believe it was 2016. I had 2 children, very young. I have 2 children. I was about 21 at the time. And I had made very adult decisions very quickly. And many of us, through life experience really very similar ranges of emotion, just at different intensities, right? And depending on circumstance and environment, it changes. And so for me, at this time in my life, I realized all of a sudden that I had created this life that I thought that I wanted, that I thought that society or my family or the people around me would be proud of, and found myself very unhappy, deeply unhappy. And a lot of it had to do with these traumas in my childhood that were still coming up for me so strongly. And at the time, especially, I wasn't very aware of them. I didn't have a practice that allowed me to be still enough or quiet enough or breathe enough to hear what was actually happening. And so at this time, I realized I was going through a pretty deep depression. And around the same moment, I had a best friend commit suicide. And I say this, it gets a little heavy, but I say this to say that that moment was a big catalyst in my life. It shifted my perspective of who I was and how I saw the world. And life and death, this grieving process that Sarah had just spoke a moment about, is something that we are not taught very well how to do, right? Not taught how to express our emotions, or even really taught anything about our emotions. Hopefully you were blessed with some great parents who are able to guide you through some of the ups and downs of life, but we find that many times that's not the case. And in that process, I was deeply unhappy. And I was very privileged to have an opportunity to go to Costa Rica and do an ayahuasca ceremony for the first time, and I had just learned about it. And so we're here at the Sound Mind Center. So psychedelics have been such a massive part of my transformation and integral to my transformation and helping me through these times. And then integration is the real work that you do to continue that process of taking those insights and integrating them into your life so that you can actually feel the change. You can be the change that you want to see in the world. And so I had this opportunity to go do these ayahuasca ceremonies. And right before my first ceremony, I told I was going to partake in a transformational breathwork session. And I had no idea what I was going to do. And all I knew is that I was going to lie there and breathe for 45 minutes. And I was open for it because, when everything seems in your life like it's, tumbling down, which happens sometimes, you'll try anything, right? You'll try anything to get you out of this dark place. And that's really where I was. And so in that moment, I was going through about 10, 15 minutes of this session. I was breathing. I was starting to feel tingling in my hands and my feet. My mouth was getting tight. And then a tremendous amount of emotion was rising for me in my chest. And I knew at that moment that I had experienced something. I was in the moment of experiencing something that would forever change my life. And so breath is integral to who we are. We can go without food. We can go without water for a bit. But we cannot go without breath for more than a few minutes before we pass. And yet we're not taught how to really work with our breath when Eastern medicine has given us this information and shared it with us, the masters, these beautiful teachings to help us learn how to access the divine, the divine within, the divine without, right? This universal intelligence. And so breath is our bridge between these worlds, between these realities. And so what we'll be doing tonight is we'll take in a high quantity of breath, a lot of breath through the mouth. And in this specific rhythm where we focus on our inhale, we relax our exhale, and then we begin to connect the breath. And don't worry, I'm going to walk you through the entire process, so you do not have to remember it now, but just to give you an idea of what will be happening. And so to get to a little bit of the science of how this is working, there is a law in physics, as we mentioned a moment ago, called the law of entrainment. And this law tells us that when two frequencies, right, come into contact with each other, the lower, denser, or heavier frequency must raise to meet the higher frequency that is introduced. Why does this happen? Well, this is because all things in nature take the path of least resistance. Right? So these emotions like hatred, anger, guilt, and shame, fear, these hold a low vibration within the physical body. And so as we breathe in this specific rhythm, creating an energetic circuit in the body, introducing this high vibration, these lower emotions that are dense and heavy and cause us pain on every level of our being begin to actually raise and entrain with this higher vibration, right, of life force, of oxygen that we are introducing. And so these emotions will start to vibrate at these levels and will feel differently in your heart, in your soul, in your body. So they will simply change without you having to mentally analyze every detail. It frees us to be in the present. And so you guys have got a lot of good information about what we're doing tonight and how transformational breath works. So it's time for us to get into it and begin to experience it for ourselves. And so what I recommend now is that you make yourselves as comfortable as possible. I'm going to give a few guidelines of ways that we can actually do the breath. And you are free to choose whatever feels good for you. Be mindful if you have any injuries to make accommodations for that. Do not hurt yourself at all in this process. We do not want to be in any pain. Excuse me. And so to begin, if you would like to sit up, if it would feel better for you to sit up in this breath, you can do so. If you choose to sit up, I recommend that you that you have a chair behind you and that you have a pillow underneath your neck and your back so that you can rest your head. If you are using your neck muscles to hold you up, or any muscles to hold you up, it will limit your expansion of the breath. And we are really working dynamically with the entire body as you do this breath work. So if that is comfortable for you, you may sit up, put a pillow underneath your neck or back. I personally recommend lying down. So I'll give a few different options for lying down. If you choose to do so, you can lie flat either on your bed or on the floor or on a yoga mat. I like to be sitting personally at about a 40-degree angle so that my back is slightly up. I'm going to show you guys what that might look like. Pretend I had a chair or a few pillows propped behind me. So I would be lying here with a few pillows propped behind me and letting my body rest completely back, making sure that your low back is completely supported as well. We tend to breathe with our back muscles, and then that also limits our expansion. One other recommendation I have is, if you are lying down, to maybe even put a pillow underneath your knees. That's one of my favorite tips, because that in itself takes so much pressure off of our low back, and a lot of people have issues around there. So if that works for you, go ahead and try that. But you can do this lying flat as long as your neck feels nice and comfortable. Take a sip of water now, as I will do as well. This time of year I have some allergies from outside and my cat, so bear with me. Thank you guys. Okay. So as you guys are getting comfortable, I'll go over the last few guidelines. So some of the things that you may experience during this session, so that you know ahead of time, so you're not in the session and like, oh my God, I'm freezing, like, or I'm sweating. Why is this happening? And it stops you or interrupts you from the process. So one of the things you may experience is different temperature variations. This could be your body releasing toxins that have come into your system. And this whole process, I just want to mention, is very, very similar to a psychedelic experience. To me, transformational breath is is and can be equivalent to a psychedelic journey, in the sense that when you ingest plant medicine, you're taking in the spirit of the plant, which holds a very high vibration. And this same process of entrainment, of working through these emotions that hold a low vibration or dense vibration within the body, begin to come up and release. And so in ceremony in indigenous cultures, they call this purging, where you're purging these toxins from your body so that the medicine can come and have more space, have more room to actually work and to show you the things it needs to show you. And so in transformational breath, basically the same thing is happening. And this is why I relate, it is so special to me, because plant medicine changed my life, and so has transformational breath. So I'm so excited for you guys to try it tonight. And so this purging can happen in different forms as you begin to breathe. So you have access at the cellular level of the memory to the memory of that trauma. And as you keep breathing, it will change its vibrational state. So if you are feeling different sensations, know that that is not a bad thing, right? The key is to continue to breathe. Do not stop breathing. We tend to hold and squeeze our exhale as a means of controlling, or our way to express our fear patterns. And so what we'll do is we will inhale just a second sooner than our exhale is actually finished. And I'll walk you through that, but just so you have an idea. And as you breathe, you will start to experience really more energy in your body, which is awesome. Everybody wants to feel more energy. Most adults do, right? Not children. And you understand that if you have them, because I just got done with my little ones today. But adults especially, we need that energy, right? So this is such a great way to revitalize your whole body, right? Oxygenate your blood, allow your brain to be more stimulated, more active, right? More focused. Also to help our nervous system, soothe our nervous system, to release so many of our toxins on our exhale, stimulate the lymphatic system, right? And also strengthen our immunity. So really beautiful things that this breathwork does purely on the physical level. Even if nothing else happens for you, you're doing so much to support yourself. So that is beautiful. And so as you begin to experience more of this energy in your body, you may experience this as a tingling or like a vibration or a numbness. A lot of people feel it in the hands, the feet, or in the jaw. And so once again, if this gets uncomfortable or you experience too much tension or it feels a little bit unbearable, go ahead and you will make some sound. And so we'll go over this in a second, what this can be like, okay? And as these energy changes are happening, you will actually feel them as you breathe, which is awesome. And so as you begin to breathe into your chest especially, you may start to feel some old feelings, some sadness, maybe some anger that comes up. It might feel overwhelming. And if you go ahead and make some sound out of your mouth as you breathe, when these feelings begin to become a little bit overwhelming for you, this will foster this integration process. And so this sound that I just mentioned, it will have a pure and clear tone. It won't be a moan or a scream. Even if that comes out though, that is totally okay. Sometimes you need to scream. If you guys ever do, hopefully we get back to in-person workshops and do a full transformational in-person workshop, you'll hear people like making all kinds of noises, and it's a little bit wild, but it's really, really powerful. But for tonight's session, we're going to try our best to make a clear, pure tone out of the mouth instead of just a scream or a moan. And so we're going to do this together so that once we're in the workshop, we're actually breathing, it won't feel weird to you, so you'll know what to do, okay? So I'm going to take a deep breath and make some sound. Deep breath in. So yours will sound a little different than mine. But this is really a way of taking whatever's going on inside and smoothing it out. See where it can take you and how the sound can raise and clear the energy. Allow the thoughts and the memories to come up and simply just move through them. Any physical sensations that come up or emotions from the memory of an experience, just continue to breathe and use your sound. So let's try together one time before we begin, okay? Let's take a deep breath in together and we'll make some sound out of our mouth, okay? Deep breath in. Good, keep going. One more time, deep breath in. Move your hands in the air this time. And you can really go for it. Allow your neck to move side to side. And then whenever you're done, take a deep breath in. Perfect. So in the session, this is what you'll do, and we'll do it one time together in the session. But at any point, if you feel like you need to do that, you'll all be muted. You're on your own at home. Please do it. It is such an incredible way to clear whatever gets stuck and stagnant inside. Okay, so we are ready to begin. Thank you guys for listening to all of that, but really, really important to know, I like to know what's really happening as we do this. And so to breathe, I hope you guys are comfortable now. Take your sip of water, last sip of water before we start our breath session. I will too. And so we are going to breathe in and out through the mouth. This is simply so we can take in more oxygen at once. We are not hyperventilating. We're going to have a relaxed exhale. And so when we breathe through our mouth, the breath has the opportunity to access the lowest parts of our body, breathing fully into our bodies. So there won't be any pauses between the inhale and the exhale. We're creating a little energetic circuit. And if we breathe and pause, it creates resistance. We hold on further to these control patterns that have been with us for 20, 30, 40, 50 or so years. So we inhale longer and exhale shorter. So I encourage you now to bring one hand to your chest and one to your low belly. Begin to open the mouth and then open it just a little wider than you think. Good. And then once you're there, take a deep breath in through the mouth. Feel the belly expand and then exhale, let it go. So in and out. So begin to notice, maybe closing the eyes, where the breath is rising and falling as we did in the beginning. Is the hand on your belly rising, or is the hand on your chest near your heart rising with your inhale? Just acknowledging where you are at in this moment. And then before we begin, finding an intention. What is it that I need right now? What is it that I need right now? And see if this intention can be positive in the present, right? And powerful. Maybe inviting in more love for myself. Opening to the love I have in my heart, right? Maybe you need a little bit more joy, a little bit more fun. Whatever it is, find that answer, find that intention. And then once you're there, your next inhale, see if you can direct the energy in the breath to your belly. So your belly is inflating like a little balloon. And the exhale, let it go. Good. The connection promotes emotional integration. So the goal is to do a natural breath that feels effortless. So focus on the inhale. Exhale, relax, let it go. Good. In and out. Focus on the inhale. Relax the exhale. And then connect your breath. So that might look like you inhaling just a second sooner than your exhale is done. So the breath might be a little bit faster than you're used to, and that is okay. Keep breathing in and out. And then notice if you are pushing on your exhale. If you're blowing it out, or if you're forcing it out, or squeezing it down like a yogic breath. And then your next inhale, bring it all the way into the low belly. Exhale. Let it just fall away, almost like a sigh with no effort. So I'm going to switch the music to something a little bit faster pace so that we can really get into this. I encourage you to play with your own rhythm. See what feels good in your body. Maybe you need to breathe a little bit more fully, take in more life, and if so, go ahead and take that nice full inhale, opening the belly, opening the heart. The exhale, allow the muscles in the back and the neck to totally relax. Notice if you have any tension or you're using any outside muscles aside from your diaphragm to breathe in and out. So we'll do an invocation to invite in spirit and to set the tone and the container for the session. Universal energy, divine spirit, we ask for your guidance, assistance, and awareness for this perfect breathing session. Good. In and out. Keep breathing. So you might notice some contractions on your inhale and your exhale. And that is okay. You're working with everything you've been through in the past in your physical body stored. Accepting what is. Maybe repeating the affirmation, it is safe to surrender. Good. It is easy to breathe. I don't have to try so hard. Trust that you are doing it perfectly. You know how to breathe. With every breath, letting go a little bit more and more. It is safe to surrender. Good. Good. Beautiful. Keep breathing. Now see if you can bring your hand on your belly a few inches lower, like 3 inches below your belly button. Just gently press in. Show a little pressure to your belly. In and out. Almost just like a wave with the inhale moving in towards the body and the exhale moving out into the all, back out to the ocean. In and out. Connecting the breath. Not holding on to the pause, and that control, that fear at the bottom of the breath. Inhaling just a second sooner than you think to. In and out. Good. You're having and creating more awareness of your breath. Good. Notice when you're holding your exhale or when you feel the tension, and use your breath to move you through that moment. In and out. Good. It is safe to be in my body in this moment. Letting the exhale just fall away, almost like a sigh, letting it go. It is easy to let go. Good. And if you need to breathe a little bit more shallow into your belly, that's okay. I'm a shallow breather. Allow yourself to focus on connecting your breath in and out, creating this beautiful little energetic circuit with your breath. Good. Imagine even a figure 8 in your mind with every breath moving up and down, up and down. Good. Beautiful. Maybe try a double inhale, sounding like this. 1, 2, out. 1, 2, out. And I'll say many things. I'll give many suggestions of how to do the breath. Just try it on. See if it fits. If it doesn't fit for you, keep going. The goal is to have an open and flowing breath. You cannot mess it up. You're doing it perfectly for your body, for yourself. So keep going. In and out. Fully supported in every breath. I am fully supported and I do not have to do it all by myself. Good. In and out. It is easy to breathe. Keep going. So we'll try some toning together. Try it on, see if it fits, and if not, keep breathing. And right at the end, you continue with a nice inhale. So deep breath in. Ah. This time, move your head from side to side. Ah. And then good, one more breath. This time bang your fists in the air. Try it out. You can do this. Ah. You're doing great. Keep going. Ah. Really go for it. And then when you're ready, deep breath in. Let it fall away. Good. It is safe to feel my feelings, however they look for me. Keep breathing. In and out. Good. In and out. In and out. Good. I allow myself to feel my feelings, however they look for me. And at any point, if you feel emotions start to rise and they become overwhelming or feel stuck, allow yourself to tone. Otherwise, keep breathing. And if you're feeling those tingles, that is a good thing. That means things are moving, things are flowing. Keep going. Good. It is easy to breathe. I breathe in all of my good with every inhale. And the exhale, I let it go. Whatever I need to, I let it go. Opening my heart with every breath. Connecting it at the bottom and the top, just like a wave. Almost like the universe is breathing me and I don't have to try so hard. Worthy to receive all that love is. I am worthy to receive all that love is. Good. And it is safe to let go. In and out. Inhaling just a second sooner than your exhale is finished. And then bringing both hands to the heart. Inhaling, opening the heart with the next breath. Good. It is safe to open my heart. In and out. Allowing the belly to be open and soft, but opening the heart. Good. I express my love with every breath. Good. It's good to feel love and to express love in every part of my life, in and out. Just like that, you are doing it right. Say, I am doing it right. Mentally, just repeat. I am doing it right. I am exactly where I need to be. I am exactly where I need to be. Good. In and out. Beautiful. And these next few breaths, allowing yourself to remember your intention. What is it that I need to know to move forward in my life? And breathing that deeply into your heart. It is safe to feel my feelings and let them go. Good. And now, whenever you're ready, we'll take a deep breath in and we'll hold it at the top for as long as you can. Just sitting in that space of stillness. And then when you're ready, exhale, let it all the way out, melting into the earth. Begin to breathe slowly, according to your natural rhythm, letting go of the need to do it right. There is nowhere to go, and there is nothing to do. but to simply be who I am, to feel my light, and to trust my power. In and out. I breathe in my good, more good than I can even imagine. And I exhale, letting go, surrendering to what I do not know. In these next few moments, allow yourself to stay where you are if it feels good for you. Maybe pull a blanket over you, make yourself comfortable, or turn onto your belly and allow your head to move to the side and feel your belly rise and fall against the earth. Allowing these next few minutes to breathe in your intention.
Arbolito divino, raíces profundos, abraza el mundo, nuestro camino, con tu medicina, todas las plantas divinas, Yajecito curaca, de la selvacita, la pachamamita trae sabiduría, nuestra familia trae alegría, la liana que guía,
Universal energy, divine spirit, we ask that whatever guidance, awareness, and assistance we need at this time, that we receive it with an open heart, calling upon our ancestors and the ones we love, the spirit of this land, to guide us in the four winds. Slowly beginning to bring awareness back to your physical body. Maybe taking a deep breath in and exhale with sound, letting it go. It is good to be alive. Maybe one more time like that. Deep breath in. Beautiful. And so allow yourself to slowly, consciously begin to make some movement. Make the conscious choice to be here and now. Maybe wiggle the fingers, wiggle the toes, roll out the shoulders. If you're lying down, taking a moment to stretch or sitting up. From side to side, a little smile at the side, grateful for the privilege to breathe. And then when you're ready, bring your hands in front of you, outstretched. And then flip your palms, bring your chin towards your chest. Inhale the arms to the sky. Little wiggle from side to side, opening the ribs. Just like we're waking up out of bed, every day is a new moment to start again. And then whenever you're ready, we're slowly going to begin to make our ways back up until we're seated. If for whatever reason you feel like you need to stay where you're at, please do so. You're at home, No problem. If you can make your way back up to become present again to close it off, that is wonderful. Use this time to take a sip of water. You guys did such a good job. This breath work is not easy, as I'm sure you see now, but so powerful, so transformational. So give yourself a second to get back into your body. Maybe even taking a few yoga poses, postures, child's pose, sip of water, a bite to eat if you have it next to you. To ground into your body. Okay. And then whenever you're ready, we're going to bring our one hand to the heart, just like in the beginning, and one hand to the belly. Just allow the eyes to close. Maybe breathe in and out now through the nose. Just noticing how it feels to be in your body in this moment. Any difference from then, from a moment ago until now. And then bring both hands, palms down to your knees. Keep the eyes closed. Let's take a few rounds of breath. Inhale through the nose. Exhale through the mouth. Inhale through the nose. Exhale through the nose. One more like that. Opening the heart. It is easy to breathe. And exhale, letting go. Thank you all so much for sharing this practice with me. Allow yourselves to, it's evening, so to be gentle with yourself. You just did a tremendous amount of work in such a beautiful, positive direction. As we mentioned in the beginning, if nothing else happened for you today, except that maybe the whole time you were focused on, am I doing this right? Which is pretty common, especially for the first time. That's okay. It's totally okay. It's exactly what happens to me almost every session I go into at the first 10, 15 minutes. Feels like I can't breathe as fully or as deeply as I would like to. And there are reasons for that, right? Our body has a cellular memory that holds on to every experience we've been through. And these memories, as we repress them, they get stuck and locked in the physical body, in our muscles. And this creates chronic tension over time. So we see body types build up, just like a personality builds up. And so you may not have been able to breathe as openly or as deeply or as fully as you may have wanted to, but trust that you did exactly what you needed to, right? That every time you go into a session, every time you go to intentionally breathe, it will become easier. And that when you move through a session, that something called an automatic breath begins to happen, an activated breath pattern, where you don't think about if you're doing it right, and you just begin to breathe, and space opens up a little bit more every time. So you did such a great job. Now, if some things happen to you, let's talk a little bit about that before we close. Maybe you felt that tingling, I'm sure you guys did, in your hands, your feet. You might have felt twitches in different muscles, maybe even the jaws. Your jaw begin to lock up, or you got a lot of tension there. That's very common. As we mentioned in the beginning, our body is going through this process of purging these stuck feelings, emotions, energies. And so really anything can happen. And in our next workshop, we'll be going a little bit through body mapping and showing you guys the body map of what this actually looks like in the body, where emotions are typically held and stored. So then we can begin to use our fingers and begin to press on the muscle, begin to connect the emotion with the actual location and begin to clear it in that way. But for today, just focusing on using the diaphragm, strengthening the respiratory system was incredible. You brought in so much more oxygen to your body, to your blood, to your brain, strengthened your immunity, calmed your nervous system. That is incredible. On the emotional level, energetic level, you may have had feelings start to come up. You might have felt that in your chest, that sadness or just that anger that's been latent in you. And we're all feeling this collectively so heavy right now. So there's a lot of it, right? Not even only from our personal experiences, our own lives, but from the collective energy of the world. And so breathing, for those who can't, is so powerful. So thank you for joining me in that process, in this process of just opening to ourselves, getting to know our feelings a little bit better so that we don't have to repress them. We don't have to shove them down. We don't have to just be strong and keep going. We can take the time to feel what's happening, connect with it, and then let it go. And let it go and move on. We can move into a life of being motivated by our dreams rather than our fears, right? And how powerful is that? So again, thank you guys so much. I guess the last thing I want to mention is take some time to journal. I really recommend just at least writing down maybe your intention. What was it that you felt like you needed to bring in? And write down a few things that happened that came up for you in the session, to know that every session will be different every single time, just like a psychedelic journey. It will never, never have two that are identical, because you're working with your breath, your life force, right? Anything can happen. You're working with your whole past, your whole life, even past lives. So trust that you did exactly what you needed to. Continue to breathe. If you would like to continue this process of uncovering limiting beliefs that you have in your life, clearing some behavior patterns that are conscious or unconscious, and really finding a new way to relate to yourself, your breath, and the world. I do private one-on-one sessions. You can find that information, as Hannah mentioned, via the Sound Mind Center's website. My website is www.spiritmedicine.co. It's not .com. Everyone thinks it is. It was literally taken, but it's .co. And go ahead and book a consultation, which is free. We can talk about what's going on in your life, how we can connect more deeply with our breath and open up more. And then lastly, I do a workshop every week at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday via Purple Moon Virtual Wellness Studio. So you can find that information on my Instagram. I do need to connect those to my website. But any questions, reach out to Hannah at Sound Mind Center. And I hopefully can send a group email to people here tonight. So thank you guys so much. Keep breathing. And thank you for taking the time. Hannah, do you want to pop in and say anything or have some time for any questions?
Yeah, that was amazing. Thank you for sharing your experiences with psychedelics. And I think Marcela earlier was talking about the concept of non-ordinary states. And I think it's important for people to understand that breath work and meditation is a type of non-ordinary state like a psychedelic. So in a lot of ways it can prepare you for psychedelic healing journeys and therapy. That's
Absolutely.
that's something I'm hoping people are getting out of this, is like getting into the meat of, all their unconscious and like
All
the
that
traumas
stuff.
built up in the body.
There's a lot of stuff. That's what and Hannah, I agree with you completely. And we were so happy to be connected initially, mainly for that reason, right? That psychedelics has had such a tremendous impact on my experience and my healing journey, really opening the floodgates, right? Like opening the doors, allowing us to access parts of the brain that cannot be accessed in other ways. And so breath work does really exactly the same thing, at least this specific method of breath work. It really does. And I use it with my clients, my ceremony clients, as integration for breath work after the fact and before. So pre-integration, post-integration, a psychedelic journey, it is really, really an incredible way to integrate, of course, all of the insights, because we have so much that comes up during a psychedelic session or journey or ceremony that sometimes it is hard to understand what happened, how to make sense of it, right? It's like mentally we have a desire to understand things on an intellectual level. And that's why talk therapy and other means of psychotherapy can be so powerful, but sometimes stop here, right? Where there's like the icebergs here, we see this much and there's so much under the surface in our unconscious. And when we breathe into the experience, it allows all of these insights really to be integrated. So there's not always a need. And I've experienced this personally to understand. I mean, I think about when we're in our mother's womb, we are, you know, there's so much that's happening in that time that science is just starting to pick, Western science is just starting to pick up on that, right? And there are not words, there's not vocabulary to understand everything that happened. Some of these memories that are so old. And so, you know, in a session, in maybe your breathwork session tonight, or some participants, or in a psychedelic journey, there might be something that comes up that you don't know what it's about. And that's very common, and that's okay. Allow yourself to keep breathing, and things will begin to connect. You will enter this incredible flow of life that allows you to understand without stressing. And I think that's beautiful, you know?
Right. So for people that that are here tonight and then might not see you on the Sound Mind series for a month, what would you recommend them to be doing in the meantime? Like, should they replay this same hour, or should they read? I know you said journaling, but if we're doing sort of a series, what's the plan?
The follow-up. Yeah, beautiful. So thank you for asking that question. It is very important. So for follow-up for this breath work, it's incredible that you guys had such intense session tonight. Virtually, I was so surprised that this was able to translate so well. I've had my own virtual sessions and got a full experience in the same way that I do in person, which is incredible to me. We know ourselves the best, right? So we can touch on our body. We know where to go. So for follow-up for this session tonight, what I recommend, and Hannah, we can talk about this after if it's okay to send a follow-up email or how that could work. But what I recommend is, if you can, in the morning practices are great just because it's an incredible way to start off the day with gratitude and intention. But at any point you can do this. Midday break is incredible, or even before bed. I like to lie down, set a timer for 5 or 10 minutes. You can put on a song that feels good, relaxing to you. I type in on Spotify Native American flute music. That's what I have on now. It's great for me. If we get that email out, you guys have access to my playlist there, the playlist we used today. So if any of that appeals to you, you can put that on. I love the indigenous rhythms and bringing in the spirit of the jungle, that energy into a session, because I really like to create it like set the container as if we are hosting ceremony or holding ceremony. That's how I like to approach every breathwork session too. And so lie down, set your timer, put your music on, allow yourself not to be interrupted if possible. Bring one hand to your belly. They're like, this is my belly. One hand to my chest. It's been a long day. One to my belly, and open the mouth. The only thing that you have to remember is that we focus on our inhale, relax the exhale, and then connect the breath. So inhaling just a second sooner than your exhale is done. This is going to look different for every person. Don't stress over the technicality of it, but just focus on the flow. We tend to hold our breath at the bottom. We often speak from this empty place of breath as well. It's our control patterns, it's our fear. So just practice. Focus on the inhale, relax the exhale, connect the breath. See if you can make it like a wave, really easy and soft, almost like you're a baby just breathing for the first time, right? Like we're not holding, we're not squeezing it. And set your intention. That's the last piece. Always set your intention. What is it that I need right now? Or what are the answers I need? Ask a specific question. Allow your intention to be positive, present, and powerful. Instead of focusing on letting go of the hate for my mother-in-law, focus on, or the anger for the world, which is valid, right? Our feelings are valid. Whatever it is, instead of focusing on what we want to let go of, focus on what we want to bring in. I need to invite in more forgiveness from my mother-in-law, or more acceptance for that person, or allowing myself to let go of this energy, right? Whatever that looks like. Just focus on what you want to bring in and let go of. And that would be your practice. I would recommend doing that every day if you can, once or twice a day, 5 minutes, best thing. And last thing is, you can do this breath. You don't have to do it lying down with your mouth open. If you want, you could do this in your car, on your work break, or wherever this is, through your nose. I'm really stuffy right now, so I'm not going to do that. But you can do it through your nose. Just focus on connecting your breath. But if you're lying down, try your mouth, because you can just take in more air, more oxygen, more life. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess even bringing in, like focusing on what you want to bring in, I think sometimes that can even be just focusing on the people you want to be more in your life, right? Because then the people you don't want to be in your life sort of can fade off more.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, in that regard, right, it's when we take the time to breathe, we are clearing the space. We are becoming more present. Breath forces you to be present, which is so powerful to me. And so we're aligning with our identity, our true core authenticity, right? And so when we carry and we strengthen this natural, innate vibration, it will, just like you're saying, allow these other vibrations that don't really align, truly, that don't resonate, to, kind of be repelled, right? It doesn't attract. Like attracts like. And so that is a really powerful practice too, in your breathing practice, to maybe even like breathe in the energy that you need, that you want, and I like on the exhale, sending that energy to every person that needs it, or like to a specific person. Breathe in what I need, breathe in what I want, what I desire. Exhale, send that loving energy to every person that needs it. I think that's great.
Amazing. I like the homework we have for the next month.
Got some homework. Yes, guys.
Okay, so spiritmedicine.co for Aubrey.
Yes.
Yeah, I got that. So awesome. Thank you for coming again. We'll see you hopefully in a month. We're going to do, the next month is going to be psychedelics for healing racial trauma specifically. So it's going to be a big one.
Okay.
So we're going to announce that shortly, and hopefully you can end it with some breath work.
That would be beautiful. Yeah, again, thank you guys so much for having me. Hannah, you are amazing. Thank you guys for the work that you are doing. It is so necessary, so needed, and I'm honored to be here. And for everybody who's watching tonight, thank you for being here as well.
I'm honored too. We're honored. Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too.
Bye.
Okay, so just let's see. So just in case anyone is looking for resources, again, Aubrey Howard is spiritmedicine.co. If you want to find Sarah Cohen, who was on last, it's resourcemedicalcenter.com. And Rick Doblin and Marcela can be found at maps.org. But everyone everyone that you saw tonight can also be found at soundmind.center. So www.soundmind.center. And we have a list of everyone. And you can also reach out to us through the website to get in touch with anyone. If you have questions, please send them to us. Sign up for a mailing list. We're also going to announce the possibility for membership for the nonprofit. So you can do a monthly membership and get exclusive access to things that you definitely want. So thank you for spending the last 4 hours with us, and I hope you got a lot out of it, and we'll see you next time. I think the next session will be mid-October. So see you soon. Bye.